Japanimation Station.
'Hello and welcome to Japanimation Station, an anime podcast brought to you by Sean Chapman.
And Jonathan Lack.
And we are here today with a very special episode because we ain't talking about that anime. We're talking about something real. And no, it's not Double Zeta Gundam, not on this one. No, it's actually something very real. We are today talking about Ultraman, Jonathan.
Indeed we are, because this month, July 17th in particular, will mark the 60th anniversary of a beloved show all over the world, particularly in Japan, particularly in the Chapman household, because Sean,
yes,
you are a huge fan of this, and you've wanted to do an Ultraman episode for a while, and you suggested one, and it's a great idea, and just briefly want to tell people what we're doing today?
Yes, so on today's episode, we are celebrating Ultraman specifically by looking at the episodes directed by the most remarkable and beloved director for the series, which is one Jissōji Akio, who directed episodes for Ultraman, Ultraseven, and then he also directed episodes when the show came back in the 90s for Ultraman Tiga, Dyna, and Ultraman Max. And his episodes are particularly relevant for Japanimation Station because Jissōji's work was highly influential in the world of anime, particularly for one guy named Anno Hideaki. You might know him from your Neon Genesis Evangelions or your Gunbusters or what have yous. But if you have never seen Jissōji's Ultraman episodes, then you ain't seen shit, because it all comes from there. It's the birth of so much of 90s anime comes from impressionable young Japanese kids watching this crazy shit on TV.
Absolutely. So we technically recorded this one for Purely Academic, which is our sister podcast where we talk about video games and news and all sorts of stuff. And we do a topic every month. We try to do a topic every month.
Yes.
And we hadn't done one in a while. But this was our topic for June. And we just thought, hey, Japanimation Station folks, probably would like an Ultraman episode. There's probably some cross-pollination there, given the audience, and so we are presenting that to you here as well as our July 4th gift to the anime fans, because our patriotism is to the land of light.
It very much is, Jonathan. So enjoy. Here is some Ultraman. We are talking today all about the one true Lord and Savior. You know, that man who came to us from the land of light up above, who walked amongst us in the form of man, to shine a light of hope into our hearts, to teach us how to walk a righteous path, to shield us from the evil that always encroaches upon the world of man. You know who I'm talking about. That's right, we're here to talk today about Jesus Christ. Ultraman. Yes, Ultraman, that's the one. We're here for Christmas in July, Jonathan, because we are here to celebrate the birth of Ultraman himself. His 60th birthday. He's getting up there in years.
Absolutely, he is. When I looked behind me, I saw one set of footprints, and they were in the shape of someone from the land of light.
Yes, and they were very big. They were really, really big footprints.
He can appear human-sized sometimes. I don't know all the rules because I didn't see all these shows in full, but sometimes he's normal-sized. So I don't know how it works.
Yeah, but there's a big set of footprints, and at the end it's really dug in deep because he had to launch up while he went shrotch and shoot up into the sky.
All right, well, we are talking about Ultraman, obviously, but do you want to tell the folks why and what we are talking about today? Because if it's just Ultraman, that would be a 4,000-hour podcast. But it's a specific Ultraman thing.
Yes, in lieu of doing Weekly Suit Ultraman, which, that might happen one day, who knows?
I'd do it. It sounds fun, but yeah.
Yeah. We are doing, I think, a very, very fun Ultraman podcast. One I've had the idea for a long time, but we're doing it now for two reasons. One, because it is the 60th anniversary of Ultraman, and two, because I finally got up to the point in my very long Ultraman journey I've been on for about 7 years now, where I've got to the point where we can do this episode, which we are celebrating the birthday of Ultraman by specifically looking at the episodes directed by the guy who is, without a doubt, the most famous and most acclaimed and most influential director of episodes in the Ultraman franchise, which is Jissōji Akio. And I very recently finished watching the show Ultraman Max, which featured his final 2 episodes that they brought him back to the franchise for shortly before his death. And I was like, I watched his final episode, and I had had this idea since back when I watched Ultraseven, which had a bunch of Jissoji episodes that, like, man, it would be very fun to do an Ultraman podcast where I've seen all the stuff, classic Weekly Suit Gundam style. I've seen it all. I know, I have not seen every Ultraman show, but I've seen all of these Ultraman shows in their entirety. And Jonathan, you are not a complete Ultraman neophyte. We've done our, Sheen Ultraman podcast. You've seen a little bit of the original show, but not much. And to do a, let's just watch Jissoji's episodes on their own as a set, do a podcast on those, be able to celebrate Ultraman as a whole and the kind of weird scope of this very bizarre franchise, but also celebrate its most bizarre and most wonderful creator within that kind of playground. And it just so happened that me watching Ultraman Max coincided perfectly with the 60th anniversary of the whole series in a Ultraman-like miracle that I find very touching.
Indeed. So yeah, you selected, you didn't select, you listed the 15 episodes of Ultraman series that Jissōji Akio directed over a 30-year period, although there's a really big gap in the middle there, obviously.
Yes.
And yeah, we watched them all. Again, this is my first exposure to most of these shows. I had seen the first couple episodes of Ultraman before. I have seen Sheen Ultraman, and I have seen the collected works of Hideaki Anno, who is unbelievably, now that I've seen all this, especially, it's like, oh my god, it's the entire story of Anno's origin is in all of this stuff, and it's kind of hilarious just how deep that goes. Not just the cinematography stuff, but the entire final bit of the last Evangelion movie, Thrice Upon a Time, when they're in the TV studio talking about Eva as a franchise. It's that's Jissōji's last 2 episodes of Ultraman, basically. So it's incredible to see that, because I've always responded to that vein in Anno's work very heavily, and obviously Anno is far from the only anime creator or modern Japanese director influenced by Jissōji, but it's really cool, and I loved watching through all of this stuff, Sean. I was obsessed with it. It's so good. If I didn't have 7 other things I need to watch right now for either podcasts or work or whatever, I would be doing an Ultraman binge at the moment, because this stuff's great. And I've never been as on the kaiju train as you are, Sean. If you ever pitch a kaiju project on the podcast, I'll do it with you happily, and it's always fun. But it's just never been my obsession quite as much. I think Ultraman is my favorite flavor of that kind of thing I've ever seen, in part because I think the 25-minute, monster of the week story for this kind of thing, I find a lot more digestible and fun than sometimes the full movies doing this. Sometimes you have an individual movie that can do this phenomenally, and sometimes you have one where it's I'm waiting 30 minutes to get to the monster, and you never have to worry about that with Ultraman. And of course, we're picking some of the best episodes here, but still, I was super into this, and it was also fun to just see some of these out of context, because one thing I learned is the Jissōji episodes don't really need a lot of context.
That's true.
They fairly rarely heavily involve the main cast, is one thing. So, I watched the opening episodes for Ultraman and Ultraseven, and then I realized I don't know if I really need to do that. And then for Tiga, Dyna, and Max, I didn't, and I was fine, because some of those, the Butterfly Dream episode or the Monster Drum episode, I'm not even sure the main characters are in that for more than 5 minutes, so it's not even really important.
Yeah, I had forgotten that about the Tiga Dyna episodes, about how like the cast of those shows are just not used almost at all. Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty wild. Yes,
It's a
but
very Doctor Who-esque thing, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, there are certain Doctor Who episodes where you should probably know the companion and what this Doctor's deal is, but there's a lot where, particularly if it's like a guest writer and director, they're writing a kind of a generic version of Doctor Who that they can do their thing with, and obviously Ultraman is very amenable to that also.
Yes. Yeah, it's very much a show that you can just come in on any random episode of almost any show, other than like the finale. You know, the finale is about the only time where you need to have a pre-existing understanding of the characters. And yes, I have found this a delightful project going, because I have not gone back and properly watched episodes of the old shows since I originally watched them, which now is a long time ago. It's been 6 or 7 years since I saw Ultraman and Ultraseven. Because obviously I've just been watching the new Ultraman shows as I go along, and then I finish one and then I move on to the next one. I've just been kind of steadily going along that way for a long time at this point. And it is just like going back to those original first two in particular was so much fun to just go back to that cast and the crazy style of those episodes, getting to watch Ultraman episodes that were shot on film again after being in the DVD digital video dumps for a very long time of the late 90s and early to mid 2000s. You're like, oh my God, these episodes look so good. Holy shit. And it's just Jissōji style is so incredible, and just getting this kind of concentrated dose of it and seeing how he evolved as a creator in his like beginnings in Ultraman and Ultraseven, which were the first like kind of big projects he was brought on to direct, and then him coming back to the series at near the end of his career after going off in movies and doing other TV shows and all this stuff. And he is like a much more elder statesman kind of director, and that like getting that like kind of concentrated dose, it was the exact thing I wanted it to be when I had in my head the fantasy of let's do the Jissōji Akio episode, and the experience of just watching all of his episodes. And it is really powerful. And I think you can really understand why there's an entire generation of creators, Japanese creators like Anno and Higuchi Shinji, you know, who also the co-director on like Shin Ultraman and Shin Godzilla and stuff, who grew up watching these episodes and they're like branded into their fucking brains. Can you imagine being like 10 years old and watching some of this shit? You know, like we're coming to it as adults, but if you're a child watching it, some of these episodes have got to be such like foundational parts of your childhood in being exposed to different kinds of cinematic storytelling.
Oh, I mean, I'll just say for my part, Sean, my top level takeaway is Jissōji Akio's episodes of Ultraman are the best cinematography I have ever seen for television. Period. End of story. Does not matter. You can throw whatever big American show you want at me. And I think this is like better uses of the camera and of visual storytelling in the medium of television. It is truly unbelievably superlative. And I don't know if I can name another director, and I can name a lot of directors. I don't know if I can name another director who feels as liberated with a camera as Jissoji does. And it's not that he's doing anything like expensive. It's never that he's like getting a crazy rig. Like the camera is a professional camera that the studio owns, and obviously that is an expense. But other than that, his favorite things are putting it in a weird place, or putting some Vaseline on the lens, or doing some diffusion, which is like you can famously do DIY with like a pair of pantyhose stretched over the lens, and, you know, maybe tilting the camera, doing a lot of handheld, and amazingly a lot of handheld in the mid-60s when that was hard to do. There are not a lot of cameras that were like ready for that yet. And, you know, maybe he'll do a crane shot every once in a while, and that's probably like the most expensive thing he's doing with the camera. But it is just, there's a liberation with like, how can I make every shot the most maximally interesting version of this shot it is possible for it to be? And when you combine that with the, I think, like, humblingly phenomenal special effects of Tsuburaya Productions, like, you've always said this, but it blew me away. I mean, the effects on Ultraman in the 60s are better than basically any American movie in the 60s. Like, B-movie, whatever. I mean, like, A pictures. It's incredible stuff. And, you wouldn't get American special effects in this vein again until like Star Wars in the late 70s. And it's just, you combine all that together and they are such dynamic pieces of visual storytelling that, yes, if you saw this as a kid and you saw the liberation that Jissōji has with this, and it was imprinted on you that there aren't rules to what you can do with the camera, you can just do whatever you want with it, of course that is going to inflect people in all sorts of ways. And Anno, Hideaki is obviously probably the greatest example of that influence, because I think he is someone who is similarly willing to be very free with cameras. And, you talked about the early episodes, obviously in the 60s, are shot on 35mm film, and later on were on digital video. But I actually thought the whole time, I was like, I'm actually excited to see what Jissōji does with digital video, because he feels like a director who wants digital video before it's there because of what he's trying to do with the camera, and he absolutely takes to it. And it's interesting that Anno did not really do live action stuff until he had digital video to work with, and then he went crazy with it because a lot of the kinds of things Jissōji likes to do are really amenable to the smaller format of digital video, the kind of infinite focus you can do with it, all of these kind of tricks. And so that was actually a really cool evolution to see in that vein too.
Yeah, and just thinking about the Anno thing, there is a documentary they've been making for the 60th anniversary. It's not out yet, so we can't see the whole thing. It's called The Origin of Ultraman. But they released a trailer for it a few days ago. And it's really like, it seems like it's probably one part covering the history of the show, but a big part of it is interviewing different people influenced by Ultraman, including like Guillermo del Toro's in it. It's not just Japanese creators, but a lot of his Japanese creators. Hideo Kojima's in there, which is a fun connection that I think you can very much see that's obviously in the video game world. But Anno is all over it. And the trailer ends with this hilarious line that I'm paraphrasing off the top of my head, but it's the most Anno thing I've ever heard, where he says something like, "I don't think I'll ever be free from the shackles of Ultraman until the day I die." It's like, that's like how he phrased it. I'm like, yeah, this is a dude who has lived with this as like of a formative experience his whole life and kind of can't ever escape from it, because it's there. And I think you could really feel it. And it was one of the inspirations I had for doing this podcast was also when we did Gunbuster, which obviously Gainax and Anno and all that. We talked about there's one shot in one of the later episodes where you're seeing like the room reflected through the glass in front of like a clock. And you're like, that's such an Anno shot. And I'm like, no, that's a fucking Ultraman shot. And and I was like, it was a thing that says like, Jonathan needs to watch the Jissōji episodes, because I knew you would because I was like, if you're pointing out that shot, you're going to love this fucking shit. Because like, it's the most, that's like one of the very Jissōji style things. The like, how can I find the most incredible way to shoot 5 people in a room having a conversation, particularly the Ultraman and Ultraseven episodes. And that shit's just the best.
Absolutely. And I'm actually working on, I can't say like what for right now, but I'm working on a little piece that'll be out later this year about Neon Genesis Evangelion, and what serendipity to be watching these while I'm working on that, because Eva is a different show when you realize it's really much less a mecha show than it is an Ultraman show. Yeah. It is an Ultraman riff. Like, obviously, it is, if you were to say its two biggest influences, it's Mobile Suit Gundam and Ultraman. Like, that's obviously what is, like, the gestalt. And there's other things in there, too, obviously. But I almost think the Gundam stuff is more the paratext of Gundam surrounding it, and, like, the, new anime era declaration and stuff like that, from which Shinseki Evangelion gets its title and stuff like that, like, influences it that way. But then a lot of, like, the actual, like, what is the narrative scenario of Eva? It is this boy has jumped into the SSSP, basically, only it's a much darker version of that, right?
Yeah, he's the pilot for Nerve in ERV,
yes.
That's like the secret military/science organization that's sort of connected to the government in a way that nobody can really understand or explain. And there's like a bunch of like old military motherfuckers that are like above that are secretly running the whole thing that the main group is always opposed against. And there's like a bunch of monsters/aliens of mysterious origin that are constantly invading. And then our hero has to, obviously in this case, he's not physically transforming into Ultraman, but get into the Eva and fight them. The whole thing of like the umbilical cords and the energy is just an extension of the color timer of Ultraman. I mean, there's one of those episodes of Ultraman that is, or of Eva, that's about the angel that's just giant and is going to crush the town, which is just a serious version of one of the episodes we're going to talk today. A Gift from the Sky, of a giant monster that the whole problem is that it's just fucking heavy, and how do we move it?
Yes.
Like the whole thing about them having to get all the energy in the giant fucking rifle to blow up the angel from super far away. Like they're super Ultraman ideas. And so, yes,
Yes.
it is one of those things that when I started watching Ultraman as well, it's a scales falling from your eyes moment of like, I've always had the like, oh, people saying that Eva is a deconstruction of Mecha is dumb because they haven't seen Gundam. But it's also dumb because they haven't seen Ultraman, because that's also not what it is. It's just an Ultraman. It's a dark version of Ultraman, is basically what it is.
Well, what I would say is, and this is not to take anything away from Eva, that's not our point.
No,
My point is
yeah.
that I've always thought, and you think, it's wrong to say I think Eva is a mecha deconstruction, because I just think that is like a historical. I think Anno himself would probably take issue with that to some degree. I think its real innovation is taking mecha tropes and putting them in the Ultraman kaiju space. And that is the thing that is so, at its best, exciting about Eva, in terms of the action stuff at least, is having your mecha robots fighting these, like, crazy, eldritch horror kaiju style things, and in this kind of, kaiju drama style plot. And I think that's the mix that makes Eva really unique. And that is something that, until you see all of the influences, you can't quite appreciate.
Yeah, but it's just one of the joys of watching Ultraman is seeing where does all this stuff come from, because Ultraman had to, invent a lot of this of like, how do you do all these things on TV and everything. So I think that's enough of the preamble. Let's get into the heart of this. So the way I've kind of split up the notes here is I've got a little bit of a history section just to kind of set up where does Ultraman and where does Jissōji come from. And then I've kind of broken up each of the shows we're watching. Basically talking about five different shows today. Tiga and Dyna kind of run together because they're kind of the same show. And I've got a little bit of an intro for each one, but I think we'll just kind of take each batch of episodes for each show as we go and kind of break those down. So let's get into the history here of where does Ultraman come from? How does this show happen? So Ultraman itself, obviously we're talking most specifically about Jissoji, but we got to keep in mind like the true mastermind behind all of this, which is Tsuburaya Eiji, who is without a doubt one of the most important and influential special effects director in the history of cinema. Like, it's not Japan, it's like the whole world. Would you like, the more you go into this guy's career, I'm giving just like a little brief snapshot here, but it's crazy how like deeply involved he is. So his career in film goes back to the 1920s, where he innovated lots of different elements of film production. This is like pre him building miniatures and stuff like that. And it's more of like an industrial engineering thing of designing and building, for example, the first iron crane for crane shots. It collapsed after that first shot, but it was still the first one that they did. After seeing King Kong in 1933, Tsuburaya became interested in the area of special effects as well, not just kind of the engineering of the materials of how to make film, but what do you put in front of the camera. Throughout the 40s and 50s, Tsuburaya continued to be an instrumental piece of the Japanese filmmaking community, continuing to develop and innovating on various techniques and technologies around filmmaking. But of course, the big kind of breakout moment that he becomes super famous is in 1954, where Tsuburaya changed the world of special effects when he served as a special effects director on the original Godzilla film. The massive domestic and international success of Godzilla blew open the doors on a whole new genre, the kaiju movie. And Tsuburaya would serve as a special effects director for virtually all of Toho's entries, which are the spine of that genre, from its inception until its sort of pseudo-death in the 70s. And Tsuburaya was the special effects directors on basically all of them until he passed away in 1970. One thing to note, though, is that he's not only doing kaiju movies at this point. I think people like sometimes, overemphasize that element because he's doing lots and lots of movies as well, including one that always jumps out to me is he did special effects work for Kurosawa Akida's Throne of Blood, which is another one that has really great special effects in it. I think you can see the power of his work.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but that doesn't surprise me because that film has some of the best special effects in film history, if you know it when you see it, and that's really cool.
Yes. In 1963, Tsuburaya founded his own studio, Tsuburaya Productions. One note is that Tsuburaya has a number of different sons that are also all in film production as well, which is part of the inspiration behind this. The most notable one being Tsuburaya Hajime, his eldest son, that's also will come up. He's foundational in Ultraman and the continuation of Ultraman. So he created a new project in collaboration with the TV company TBS, that's Tokyo Broadcasting System, not our TBS, and that would bring the kaiju genre to television for the first time. Initially titled Unbalance, the goal was to create a sci-fi anthology series, which that in and of itself would be a first for that kind of genre in Japan on TV. And one of the main influences was, of course, Twilight Zone. So that kind of show, but one that leverages Tsuburaya's expertise in special effects to create elaborate miniatures and giant monster suits for each episode. As they were creating an unprecedented show, again, their idea is let's take this genre that's super popular in the movie theater and let's put it on the small screen that's in everybody's living room. That project became very complicated very quickly. The average project or budget of every episode was 5 million yen, which was nearly 3 times the norm at the time, making it the most expensive TV series in Japan at the time. Ultimately, the show would change its title a couple of times and land on Ultra Q, and Ultra Q ran for 27 episodes from January to July 1966. Now, Ultra Q was an immediate and explosive success. Its revolutionary concept, being able to see a new kaiju each week with special effects that rivaled what was playing in theaters, proved to strike a chord with the audience at the height of the very first kaiju boom. The show averaged ratings around 30% and was a massive marketing success, with toys and plushes of the kaiju proving extremely popular amongst its core audience of elementary to middle school children. The series proved so successful that TBS immediately requested a follow-up series, but one that would feature a central hero figure who would battle the new kaiju each week, and that is where Ultraman comes from. But of course, in that mix, we got to talk about our boy Jissōji Akio. Where does he come from? So he was a young TV director around this time. He was 29 years old when he began working at TBS and TV. And he was a assistant director on TV from 1959 to 1961, mostly working on music programs. So watching people literally sing, but was able to occasionally work on TV dramas. However, when he worked on TV drama scenes, he would often imbue it with a strange, surreal style. And one anecdote, I can't vouch for if this is accurate or not, but it's repeated a lot online, goes that for a dramatic scene, Jissoji blocked out all the lights except for a single spotlight on the main actor. I definitely believe he did that. And had snow inexplicably begin falling. That all sounds true. This next part, I'm a little bit skeptical of, but it's such a good anecdote, I'm going to say it anyways. He was criticized by people in the production asking him, why would you make snow fall here? But he later received a note from director Tsuburaya Eiji saying, I loved how you directed that scene, but you should have included more snow. I really hope that's true. I'm skeptical of it, but it's such a great anecdote. But it is certainly true that he was a weird maverick that was doing weird shit when he was basically still a kid at TBS. In 1962, Jissoji moved up from assistant director to a full episode director, but he was still mostly just working on music programs. However, even his music programs would incorporate his weird stylistic quirks, such as doing super extreme close-ups, a thing that he does in all of his stuff. One specifically described that I read was him doing a super close-up on the singer's mouth, even to the point of showing the inside of their throat, and then also pulling the camera way, way, way back and making the singer very tiny on screen. Again, both of these are things you can see him do in countless episodes of Ultraman. In 1964, the show he was working on called Dekkaku Ihiro, or Live Big, was canceled, and Jissoji found himself without anything to work on at TBS. That's when Tsuburaya Hajime, who is, again, Eiji's oldest son and a major director at TBS at the time, said to him, hey, you should really come over to this new film department. In the meantime, how would you feel about writing some tokusatsu scripts? Basically trying to poach, because Hajime was going around trying to poach a bunch of people to work on Ultra Q at this time. In 1965, Jissoji joined the newly formed film department at TBS, which was cooperating in the production of Ultra Q, and Jissoji helped bring in the subcontracted directors for each episode onto that project. And Tsuburaya Hajime had suggested Jissoji also wrote 2 scripts for Ultra Q, which those scripts were accepted, but they ultimately were never produced. There's a whole massive list. I don't have them in all my notes because it's a big thing. But he continued to write lots of scripts for shows, but most of his Ultraman show scripts that he did not direct himself, those scripts never ended up being actually produced into full episodes. Near the end of Ultra Q, Jissoji was given a new project. He was asked to direct a TV documentary about the show and director, Tsuburaya Eiji, who was effectively a household name at this point because Ultra Q was so famous. And of course, Tsuburaya's work on the Godzilla movies and stuff like that. Jissoji directed the documentary, which is called Gendai Shuyaku Ultra Q no Oyaji, or Modern Protagonist, the Father of Ultra Q. And this documentary itself features many of Jissoji's stylistic quirks and flourishes, and it was well liked within Tsuburaya Productions and by Eiji himself, which opened the door for Jissoji to then do direction on the actual production of Ultraman itself. And this is where we can take a little bit of a break and talk about this documentary, because luckily it is still very accessible online. You can find it if you Google around it. It's on the Internet Archives, and it is just the most delightful fucking thing, because it is just the most, yep, this dude was this dude from the moment he was born project I've ever seen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the first things you get is like the penchant for weird titles and like placement on screen.
Yeah.
Which is like totally one of his things. You have all of the weird camera angles, you have the lighting. And I think the centerpiece of this is the long conversation you have with Tsuburaya Eiji and several guys in kaiju suits who are they are in the diegesis of the documentary, the actual kaiju, talking to him, which also becomes a trope in his Ultraman episodes,
yes,
including his final episode he ever directed. I had to like pause and appreciate this when we got to that one, Sean, and I'm like, it's got the scene of a dude just at a table being a kaiju talking to another dude, and it's like one of my favorite things in Jissoji's stuff because it is so surreal and awesome.
Yes, it is just so funny, because I watched this before I then went on to the other episodes, and then I rewatched it again last night because I was like, I should look at the documentary again. And it is just so hilarious that like almost every one of his stylistic quirks, at least all the ones that he could show off, are here in full display, you know, like him shooting, you know, the kind of like pseudo voyeuristic style he often has of shooting through objects that are like in the foreground. Like there's one of my favorites is he has that one interview with one of the film producers at Toho that worked with Tsuburaya Eiji, and the interview is filmed where the camera looks like it's like between two cushions on a couch or something like that.
Yes.
And then it zooms super close in this little like slither between these two cushions on the dude's face, and he's looking like off at whoever is actually talking to him. And it's just such a strange way to film an interview in any context, but especially being some like 29-year-old guy or like 31 or 32 he would have been at this point, and you're talking to a bigwig, you know, he's the vice president of Toho, and you're like, I'm going to put the camera here and you go talk to this guy over here and just don't worry about it. There's also maybe my favorite shot in the whole thing is there is an interview that is basically it's just Tsuburaya Eiji and his wife and his third son all talking around kind of dinner, and there's this, and he's talking about the first movie that Tsuburaya Eiji directed, which was a Kagehime, the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter adaptation. And there's a shot where he starts talking about how Eiji was obsessed with airplanes when he was a kid, and when he's talking about that, and like, but I felt like it could never fly. There's a shot of the documentary that is from behind a bird cage with a bird in it, and you're seeing Eiji through that. I'm like, this is the most Jissōji Akio shot of his whole fucking career, and it's for this weird TV interview. And there is a great anecdote where Eiji commented apparently that like, man, you put the camera in really weird places. Like, do you want me to move that bird cage for you? It's just like, no, just leave it right where it is, please.
It's amazing. And like, also again, one thing I want to stress is cameras were not miniaturized yet in the 1960s. Like, you were just getting there for like some documentary stuff. You could get some 16mm cameras, but like it's still not like the norm that you would have small portable cameras. And he's doing stuff that today you would be doing with like a GoPro. In fact, in the Shin Ultraman movie, which Higuchi Shinji shot or directed, but Anno was the DP on, Anno used a lot of like GoPro style cameras to put them in all the different places, because if it's small, you can just kind of put them, and they're cheaper. And that's not what Jissoji is working with, which just speaks to like also the purposefulness of it all, right?
Yes, that he clearly has such a strong vision in his mind's eye of what he wants the final picture to be, and he's working around the technology that's not really designed for that kind of shooting. One of my other favorite parts of this documentary is there's a section where it shows Eiji and his family at church praying, because I know I've talked about this before, and of course I had my kind of joke intro with Ultraman being Jesus Christ, because he kind of is. If Jesus was very cool and fought monsters. But Eiji, you know, was converted to Catholicism with his wife as an adult. And so they do have a whole sequence where he's at church praying. And I thought there's just something I found very touching about it, because it's a thing I've known for a long time, just having read about it. But there's something very different about seeing it and kind of understanding that it clearly was an important enough part of who he is as a person that Jissoji felt like it needed to be there in the documentary to show this aspect. Because I do think it's very much embedded into the fundamental philosophy of Ultraman as a show, that he is this sort of Christ-like figure, this divine being, a being made out of light, who comes to Earth, inhabits the body of a man, helps humanity, but critically it is a humans fight as hard as they can and go as hard as they can under their own power. And once they have hit their limit, that is when Ultraman, the kind of like the miracle of Ultraman, steps in and pushes it over that last little edge. And the whole idea is for humanity to then grow to the point that they do not need Ultraman anymore, that they don't need those miracles. And I think like as a like idea around faith and spirituality, I find it very compelling. I think it's dramatically very compelling. But I think you can just kind of see some of those ideas are very much inherent to what makes Ultraman what it is.
Well, and it's also, if we want to make the Eva comparison again, it's like, you know, the Christian imagery and allegory in Ultraman is very clearly, you know, like deeply felt, and it is, as you say, it's very coherent in the narrative in that way and in the themes, versus something like an Eva or the million other anime that like use Christian imagery, use the cross, use the stigmata, use whatever, but use it more like we would use like Greek mythology or something. And it's not really attached to the theology or anything. And that's how you see it, I think, come to the fore in Eva. But it is a different thing with Ultraman because of, as you say, where it's coming from. And yeah, I like those shots too. It is also like the way Jissoji will shoot the cross. So the first shot is the cross seen through this bush, like the camera is in a bush and it's seeing the cross outside the church through these leaves. So it is like this voyeuristic shot on the church, but it like, again, Jissoji has a very strong sense of the iconography of all that, which we'll see again in one of his most famous episodes that ends with a funeral and has the cross at sunrise and all of this, or at sunset and all of that stuff.
Yeah. But I was so tickled by this documentary. I think it's fantastic. It does also have, this is less Jissoji, it's more just, the opening of it is it's a bunch of kids playing with people that are in monster suits from Ultra Q, and there's a kid in one of them, which is adorable. But he's talking to one of the kids, and the kid is like, I saw Godzilla at the zoo. And the adult interview is like, what? You saw Godzilla? Yeah, I saw a little Godzilla. What are you talking about? So it's like, oh, sorry, no, it was a gorilla. It's like, you can't mix up a gorilla and Godzilla. And to be clear, in Japanese, there's just a one-letter difference. It's Gojira is Godzilla and Godira is gorilla. This kid is like, yeah, I saw Godzilla at the zoo. I saw a little Godzilla. It's like, oh, wait, no, sorry, it was just a gorilla. I hope that kid grew up to be a comedian.
Yeah. Sean, can you imagine if, like, when you were a kid, you got to go to Tsuburaya and just play with all the monster suits? How much would that have fucking changed your life?
Yeah, that's like, I definitely had that thought watching that opening scene. Like, this is the most incredible thing. And then, you know, as a documentary, I do love it also. It comes kind of full circle because it ends with a shot of Tsuburaya Eiji walking down the street with these, like, letters, and then kids narrating these letters that they wrote of like, thank you so much, Mr. Tsuburaya. I love Ultra Q. It's my favorite thing. My favorite one is one kid's like, please make a great action movie, which is just a great letter to send to someone. It's like, hey, I want you to make a great action movie, please. But it's the children are so central to what makes Ultraman what it is. I'm saying that when we're watching all the Ultraman episodes that don't have the kid characters in any of them, because there are kids as part of the main
one or two that are kid-centric.
So Jissoji uses kids in a very different way than other Ultraman directors, and we'll get to that in some of his. But but in the original Ultraman, there's a kid, Hoshino, who's part of the main cast, and that kid is not in any of his episodes.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. Yeah, because he's also not in the premiere, I don't think, or not much then, because I didn't meet him.
No, he comes in a little bit later, but
okay.
But yes, it's something where kids and their relationship to monsters and all that is a very fundamental thing, and that is part of some of his first episodes for sure. He sets up one of the most kind of classic episodes in that style. But I just found it very touching, as with many things with this documentary, that it hits on that right away, of that children and their dreams and how they see monsters are very central to the identity of Ultraman. The idea that like the monsters are not evil, that they have personalities that are defined by like the costume and all that kind of stuff. And yes, we're probably in these old Ultraman shows, they just blow up the monster basically every time, or they throw him out into space to be part of the monster graveyard. Another thing we'll see today. But that it is you're meant to kind of sympathize with the monsters in the way that you are with Godzilla, right? That you kind of feel bad for him, or you recognize that he is an animal that has also suffered and things like that, and that's so essential. And they talk a lot about it in the documentary as well.
No, it's cool because a lot of my favorite kaiju stuff I've ever seen is the kaiju stuff that leans into this, the like connection with children, or the childishness that it can have, because obviously we love a movie like an original Godzilla or a Godzilla -1 where the monster is terrifying and a metaphor for much bigger things, but also we just love the monsters, and sometimes it's fun to just embrace that side of it, and so, you know, some of the like later, you know, Showa era Godzilla movies do this obviously, and I think you know, one of my favorite episodes here is the one about the kids' drawings becoming the monsters. Is such a great fucking idea, and there's a lot of that in Ultraman where like they clearly, Ultraman is a show influenced by the like reception Tsuburaya has had from kids, and is like putting that into the show, and I love seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Anything
well,
else?
Let's talk about the show itself.
Okay, yeah.
So let's get into it.
So, as fate would have it, Jissōji's first direction work for Ultraman was actually the first thing made for Ultraman itself, which is the stage show The Birth of Ultraman, which is a sort of kind of pilot episode thing. I don't know how you describe what this is. It is a thing for Ultraman performed live on stage that was also recorded for TV. It was like a thing that was edited into a TV episode. The TV episode itself exists in fragments that have been like edited and cobbled back together into a version you can watch. It is available on the Birth of Ultraman Blu-ray set, which has a bunch of like first Ultraman episodes, including this thing. It is also online on like Tubi. The original broadcast of the episode, quote unquote episode, aired on July 10th, 1966, and it exists entirely as a means of bridging a week gap that happened because of complicated scheduling things that I don't want to go into, because it would have been like a page of notes to get into why all this shit happened. It has to do with like producers not wanting which episode to be the last episode of Ultra Q and all this shit. But basically there was a week gap between when the last week of Ultra Q aired and the first episode of Ultraman was going to air on July 17th. So they made this like weird stage show as a way of kind of celebrating the birth of this new thing, taking elements of what would be in the first episode, making a filmed live stage performance. According to Jissoji, he and another director at TBS, Higuchi Yuzo, were assigned to direct the live performance, but neither of them wanted to do it. And so they spent most of the production and like rehearsal time playing mahjong in a hotel room, which is great. I have to imagine that hotel room was probably fucking stank full of cigarette smoke if we're talking Japan in the mid-60s. They're playing mahjong. I'm just like picturing like Sugawara Bunta kicking in the door and like beating them up because they're playing a game and not like paying for the rights to play on Yakuza turf or some shit. Ultimately, Jissōji lost a bet with Higuchi and he was forced to direct the episode. The show was a complete debacle, with the actors ad-libbing throughout in various technical issues, including an incident where, quote, the suspension wires failed when Ultraman entered, leaving him dangling, the curtain jammed, exposing him to booing children, which is just a horrifying thing to imagine in your mind's eye. Jissōji was forced to be highly creative in the editing in order to construct a usable episode for TV, and he ultimately scrubbed his name from the credits out of embarrassment.
There, Tsuburaya, for one of some Ultraman anniversary someday, should produce a fictional movie, like a dramatization of the making of that show.
Yes.
Like, there was the movie a couple years ago about the first episode of Saturday Night Live. I want that. I want, like, the movie where you've got actors playing Jissoji and everyone else as they're trying to do whoever's in the Ultraman suit for that thing, and the suspension wires. I want all of that. I want the kids being horrified by it. I just think it would be a very fun, like, 90-minute movie.
Yeah, and Anno needs to direct it, because Anno would do the best shit of just showing all the chaos of the rehearsals and then just doing smash cuts to these two Japanese dudes in a hotel room smoking and playing mahjong and just ignoring it. It would be so good. Again, this was just a very like, TV was what TV was, and it's live, and it's like, fuck it, we're gonna do it. We gotta have something that fills this block, and this is what we're going to do. So that was a complete debacle, but the actual series was not. The actual series, which aired the week after the quote-unquote birth of Ultraman, Ultraman itself, an overwhelming and absolutely groundbreaking success. The first episode received ratings of 34%, with the series as a whole averaging at 36%, and the anti-penultimate episode, A Small Hero, garnering an eye-watering 42% ratings. We have been, as we're recording stuff for the Japanimation station with Tomino, been talking about ratings in the 80s for anime, and it's just, I love looking back at the 60s and 50s and stuff, being like, yeah, I've like 42% of Japanese households watched this episode. Shit's like just insane. Needless to say, it was very popular. Ultraman immediately beat out the already impressive results of Ultra Q, which had hovered around more the 30 to 32% rating range, and Ultraman immediately became a massive pop culture icon that changed the course of the tokusatsu genre forever, with countless knockoffs being created immediately in its aftermath to capitalize on the incredible popularity of Ultraman. The show itself ran for 39 episodes from July 1966 to April 1967, and Ultraman laid the foundations for the genre. Like, both Ultraman and things inspired by it all feature this same kind of structure. It's got a main cast of 5 characters who form the Kagaku Tokusotai, with a science special search party, the SSSP. Additionally, in some episodes, the young boy Hoshino Isamu, again, he's not in any of the episodes we're talking about today, but he would join the cast for an even 6. The SSSP would fight monsters and alien invaders in their special jet VTOLs, or fight them from the ground using their super guns, which I always love in Ultraman when you just have normal people shooting pistol-sized guns and somehow it's supposed to hurt the monster. But, you know. However, they would always fall short, and it was up to Ultraman to save the day. In the first episode, Ultraman inhabits the body of the SSSP member Hayate Shin, who effectively dies in battle against the first alien invader. Ultraman restores his life by lending Hayate his power, and Hayate is then able to transform into Ultraman using his special beta capsule, which he holds aloft and turns into Ultraman. However, Ultraman's power is only strong enough to fight on Earth for 3 minutes, and when his power runs low, the color timer on his chest begins to flash red, creating a sense of drama and urgency for the audience. All of these elements would prove standard in nearly all Ultraman series to come, but if there is one uniquely defining trait, in my opinion, to the original Ultraman compared to its successors, it is probably Hayate himself, who's less of a character, more of an audience avatar. This jumped out to me more even rewatching these, that he is like a video game protagonist in a TV show. He lurks on the edges of scenes, has very little dialogue, and he's always watching carefully for his opportunity to spring into action to save the day in Superman-like fashion. And in that sense, for most episodes, the actual narrative protagonist role does not go to Hayate, but it usually goes to the science expert on the team, Ide, which is a thing we'll see in some of the episodes we're talking about today. For the purposes of our podcast, we're talking about 6 Ultraman episodes directed by the 29-year-old Jissōji Akio. These episodes immediately showcase his unique aesthetic stylings and surely inspired many of the young minds watching the show. Notably, all 6 of those episodes were written by Sasaki Mamoru, a writer whom Jissōji had befriended and would continue to work with throughout his career.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, Ultraman is awesome. One thing because I don't know when we'll talk about it specifically with these episodes, is I just want to hail, and I know to you, Sean, this is hardly a revelation, but to me it was like really hit home for me, is how fucking good the special effects are in Ultraman. Like, can you fucking imagine being a child in the 60s in Japan and being like, I don't have to go to the movie theater for this? This is on my fucking TV right there in color? This is amazing. It's like, you know, obviously a lot of what you're looking at is little toys and models and stuff like that. But one, they're pretty good little toys and models, particularly like the actual like cityscapes and stuff like that. And the thing that just stood out to me is how what really Tsuburaya Productions is bringing isn't money or like that. It's the expertise. It's the ability to like break down a script and go, what shots do we need? How do we cut between them? Like, so much of like good special effects in this vein is the ability to seamlessly and coherently mix what is live on set or location with the human actors reacting to or interacting with things, and then the shots of people on the miniature stage in the monster costumes doing all of that stuff, or like, you know, dangling the little toy planes and stuff like that. And that is just something that they are so good at. I think it's easy to take for granted, but when you look at it and you think about, like, this, there's just a lot of planning that has to go into it. Like, the main thing that Tsuburaya Productions is bringing to the table here is the ability to, like, break down the episode and know where you need to cut, where you have the shots, and how to execute on that. And that is just, like, a level of expertise that if you look at other sci-fi shows from, like, America or the UK in this period, like a Doctor Who or a Star Trek or something, it's like it's out of a different era of film entirely. It's crazy.
Yeah, because specifically, it is exactly contemporaneous with the original Star Trek show, and it would be Patrick Troughton era Doctor Who
Doctor
in
Who,
the
yeah.
UK. Which obviously Doctor Who is working on a very different budget than these other two shows, so it's not
Yes.
very fair to compare it. But you know, but obviously Star Trek and Ultraman are very comparable. You know, the big difference being Star Trek episodes are longer. But it is just, and I love the original Star Trek series. I think that show has awesome special effects, and the sets are fucking amazing, and it is a great, great show. But with Ultraman is just crazy. Like, it's just on such a different level. And especially when you think about that, every fucking week, these guys have to make a new big city and a new costume for a guy to, like, stomp around in. And as you say, the expertise that is needed of so many different elements of the craft of filmmaking to come into harmony to put out 39 episodes in a year. And then eventually Tsuburaya Productions will be doing 50 episodes a year once you get to the other shows with this. And every week it's a new episode. It's crazy. And then it's like, and then the show ends and the next week it's then the next show. You know, we did the last episode of Return of Ultraman. Now we got to do next week is the first episode of Ultraman Ace, you know. It is the production efficiency of that is something that is just kind of a miracle and utterly mind-boggling to me. Like, when we think about like modern TV shows, and it's like we got 4 episodes that came out every 4 years. It's like, great. Yeah. It's like, look at this shit they were doing. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yes. No, totally. And I was thinking about this a lot while watching the Jissoji episodes, obviously, but like, I think part of the reason why Jissoji and Ultraman more broadly has had such an influence on animators is because Ultraman has a very animation-esque aesthetic. Like, it's very storyboarded. It feels very like, because it has to be for the special effects stuff, right? You have to know what the shot list is very precisely if you're going to do any of this, right? You cannot be improvising or figuring it out on the day. And I don't know what Jissoji's like personal technique was here, but they feel very storyboarded, very planned. The kinds of shots Jissoji goes for in particular are shots that are easier to do in animation than in live action. I think is another reason why animators sometimes turn to, like, I think you see a lot of this kind of stuff in KyoAni stuff too,
yes,
in terms of like the weird camera angles and whatnot. And all of that, again, is something that, because it's so conceptual, I think it lends itself to animation very well. And I think the special effects stuff is the same way, where it works on a level that I think if you are someone going into or interested in animation, this is actually very instructive, despite it not being an animated work.
Exactly. Yes, I very much agree, and you can see its influence in anime like immediately in early anime, because I think like Super Robot stuff is obviously hugely influenced by Ultraman and kind of kills Ultraman because it's like it's the mid-70s is when all the kaiju stuff kind of ends because anime becomes super popular with the main demographic of elementary and middle school boys that supported these shows. And it's because they kind of learned those lessons, were able to do it in maybe a more efficient way. And Ultraman shows just kind of get a little bit worse over time or get a little bit less child-friendly in the case of Ultraman Leo, where he's, you know, Ultraseven gets his leg violently broken in the first episode of Ultraman Leo, so it's maybe not the best show for little kids. And Super Robots kind of take that over. And I think you're right, that it is, you know, animation kind of comes into this space and it learns a lot of the lessons of what Ultraman kind of lays out here.
Okay, now I'm like, okay, I gotta add Ultraman Leo to my collection. That sounds fucking awesome.
It's so good. Ultraman Leo kicks ass. That's the one that it's basically... it's when Bruce Lee martial arts movies are really, really big. And so every episode is like a martial arts movie thing of where Ultraman Leo fights the bad guy, loses at the beginning. And then Ultraseven, who's the mentor figure because his leg got broken in the first episode, he can't fight, has to teach the new hero Ultraman Leo like some new technique he can use to fight the bad guy. It kicks ass. It's such a good show.
That's so cool. I'm literally looking at the Blu-ray cover right now, and it's Ultraman Leo doing the pose where he's got one hand behind his back and one in the claw forward. I'm like, yeah, that's you. I see the Bruce Lee connection right there. Anyway, we're getting off topic. But yeah, I mean, you know, I love watching these episodes. The Ultraman set of Jissōji episodes, which is obviously the show he did the most episodes of. He did 6 of these. It's also cool because you see the growth and you see like the evolution of both, like, at the beginning, it kind of feels like Jissoji pulling the show towards him, and later on it kind of feels like the show coming to him, if that makes sense. Of like the scripts and the stories start being like, this is really amenable to what you're doing. And I really loved it. And I spent a lot of these episodes, and this continued through Ultraseven and Tiga and all the other shows, spending a lot of time, Sean, in my notes writing about and thinking about, like, in what way could I work these into film classes? Because they're so instructive for so many things. Like, honestly, I don't know if I could sell it, but I think I could do a killer week on cinematography just using Jissōji episodes. Because it's everything. Every possible trick is in there, and they're great. But even down to, like, film theory stuff, where if I can transition, if that's okay, Sean, into our first episode, the Pearl Defense Directive. I was thinking a lot about auteur theory with these, because I think auteur theory is something that in, like, lay circles is, and, like, common parlance is somewhat slightly misunderstood. I think the basics of, like, there's a distinctive director and we go to the movie, for that, and that person's style is, like, obvious. But, like, if you go to, like, the original, like, French New Wave writing on auteur theory, like, one of the original pieces by Alexander Ostrich is Le Camera Stylo, or the camera pen. And the whole idea is that the director writes the film like a writer writes, with words. And it is the camera that is the thing the director is writing with alongside the mise-en-scène. And part of this was also sort of a primacy that the French New Wave writers would put on the director over the screenwriter. And there were specific, like, political purposes for that in France at the time, which was a very screenwriter-centric industry that they felt they couldn't break into. And so part of it is also, like, a permission structure for them to break into the industry. But these are, like, all fundamental ideas. And I think I could make a killer auteur theory lesson using the Pearl Defense Directive, because in your notes, Sean, you wrote, this is probably Jissōji's weakest episode, and it probably is, looking at all of them, but I took it's a fucking 2 pages of notes on this thing, and it took me like 40 minutes to watch, because I kept pausing and looking at it, because the plot of it is kind of nothing. It is just, there's a monster eating pearls, and they gotta fight it. It's the most monster fighting of any of these episodes, because it is most of the runtime of the episode is just figuring out how to fight the monster. And, it's very bog standard. It is almost like Ultraman Mad Libs as a script, right? Like, we're out in the world, the monster's doing something, blah, blah, blah. But I think that actually means that it is also, as a, like, control group experiment, it is one of the ones where you can most purely see Jissōji's style, because that's kind of all the episode has to hang its hat on, is what he's doing with the camera and the mise-en-scène, and it's fucking extraordinary. Like, no shot is the easy expected version of what you'd expect. The pearls in that first scene where they're at the jewelry store are shot in close-up with diffusion, and our first image of humans is through the glass in a long, smooth tracking shot as they go along the window, and everything is through glass or other prisms. And so, like, one of the things that I think original, like, uncut auteur theory would tell you is that don't be focusing on, like, the narrative things as much and the tropes, because that's all, like, the script. That's a separate thing. How is the director writing in the language of film? And this is actually a really clear example of that, because the story, you can so easily imagine this script done in a much more conventional way by a different director, but it's by the most unconventional director, and so everything that is extraordinary about it is these things that are kind of divorced from the story. Now, obviously, you will get later scripts and stories like, My Home is Earth, or something like that, where the story is really good, and then Jissōji is elevating it, and it all feels, like, very amenable to his style, and that makes for a truly great work of art. But I think just in terms of, like, understanding what does the director do and what makes someone an auteur, I think the Pearl Defense Directive is actually, like, a phenomenal control study in that.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on there. That, like, as an episode of Ultraman, like, it is the most bog standard episode of Ultraman that Jissōji is given. And I think that is because it is the first episode that Sasaki Mamoru, the scriptwriter that did all of his Ultraman episodes, wrote. It is like, it feels like, almost like a leftover script from Ultra Q that got Ultraman shoved into it, that as an Ultra Q episode it would have been better, because it would have been focused more on better is depending on how you look at it, because the social commentary stuff is maybe a little bit awkward in a modern context with the women like pearls too much thing. But you could do way more with that idea as a social satire, which it kind of feels like is what the idea is it's supposed to be in the monster. It's this kind of thing that is eating the pearls, and it reflects this kind of, like, avariceness that is, maybe unfortunately overly associated with women specifically here and all that kind of stuff. But Ultraman coming in and fighting the monster does nothing for that plot. And in Ultra Q, it would have worked better in there is no Ultraman. It is like we're just dealing with the monster in its own terms. And so as an episode on its own, I find it kind of relatively unremarkable, but it does have particularly that opening section, because I think you can also tell that Jissoji's not super... I mean, he never, I think, was super into the giant monster stuff itself. And you see in the later episodes, he makes all the giant monster stuff fucking crazy when he comes back in the 90s. Like, all of those sequences are totally outside the norm. In Ultraman and Ultra 7, he's still more having to play in the style of, how, you know, these episodes need to have some kind of fight. Ultra 7, that becomes less prioritized. And he's not super accustomed at that, and he doesn't know how to structure that as well. So I think it's like, doesn't know how to do the giant monster stuff as well as like another director on this episode would have probably made that stuff more interesting than that. But that opening section, when it's all just humans and it's setting up, it's Ide and Fuji going and buying pearls, like that stuff, the way it's filmed, the pacing of it, the shots that reflect, that are using reflections and looking through glass or looking through the pearls, it just so like is mesmerizing in this way that is just absolutely incredible. And then it ends up becoming this kind of relatively nothing episode once the monster comes into it. But I like what you're saying there about the auteur theory piece, that if you're looking at it as how is the camera being used, and what is that kind of like directorial voice from a like visual perspective or the use of images, immediately stands out as being particularly remarkable, even amongst the original Ultraman directors, which I do want to shout out, even though we're just doing Jissōji episodes. Ultraman and Ultra 7 have lots of other directors that are really fucking good too, and are coming from a generation of really remarkable directors. And so there are other directors that are doing really fascinating shots. Like Jissoji is not an outlier in those shows to the way he is when we get to Tiga, Dyna, and Max. He's a complete fucking outlier. Like, he's on his own island there. Quite literally, he's making those episodes with his own production group. They're made by different people. Ultraman and Ultra 7, he is a genius amongst geniuses, kind of, in this group of like other people making great episodes. But some of this visual stuff he's doing is like just truly remarkable here.
Well, and again, going back to like the pure uncut original auteur theory, and this is the thing that I think people get tripped up on, is that idea of the using film as a means of self-expression. So imagine the camera as a pen, as the notes in a song. It's the thing you are expressing yourself through. Really, in song, it would be like the vocalizations. And, you know, for that reason, I think there are directors that we would consider auteurs today who, under that original theory, would probably not be considered auteurs. Like Christopher Nolan is someone who is like pretty obviously an auteur in a lot of ways, but in terms of like his actual like camera work and stuff, it's not like you could just look at a random frame of a Nolan film and immediately know it's him, the way you could with like a Wes Anderson, who is obviously one. But I think in that original uncut form, Jissoji is under that, like, yes, you can look at any frame of a Jissōji episode and guess who did it because of those various things we're talking about here. And I even actually do like how he shoots the monster action in this one, where he does it all in like intense close-ups. That is something you notice in his early ones. He's always trying to find a way to make the monster action more distinctive, and I agree he finds more success with that in the newer shows, where he's able to just go fucking nuts with it. But like, I really like he really emphasizes the like tactile quality of the suits in this one, and it looks really cool, and I like that. So, you know, I wrote in my notes that, man, I could just watch this without subtitles, without any narrative context, just as like a visual work of art, and I love it. And actually, it's probably a more enjoyable way to watch it than trying to think about the story and what do the pearls say about you. It doesn't do any of that. Later episodes will do that. This one doesn't.
Yes, yeah. I do think that is the thing for this one, is that if you had it on mute, basically, or you just played some classical music while you watched it, you probably would have a better time with it than like trying to actually look at it as a more conventional episode of Ultraman.
You mean play more classical music than is already in the episode, because it's Jissōji Ultraman. Another thing Anno loves to take is all of the classical music. Yes. It's great.
Very much so. All right, but let's move on to a much better episode, because this is where the scripts and the direction both start, because from here on out, it's like they're all fucking bangers. Like, it's just crazy. Yes. So episode 15, Terrifying Cosmic Rays, featuring the two-dimensional monster Gavadon. This episode, from a Ultraman perspective, is really, really important, because it establishes a trope that most Ultraman shows have at least one episode that is built in this model, with the central idea being a child who creates the monster through drawings or through dreams. There's kind of an adult version of that in, of course, one of Jissoji's later episodes we'll talk about. But this notion of the children sympathizing with the monster and doing something to create a monster, the monster evolving and all that kind of stuff, like, it's all set up by this episode, and it's a trope that the Ultraman shows run with. But this one immediately is so striking. And it has one of my favorite things of Japanese film from this period, which is putting a bunch of people in a weird big concrete pipe yard and just going to fucking town, because it's the best shit. There's a bunch of Godzilla movies that have these kinds of scenes. You put in the notes the Lupin the Third movie, the live action one we talked about. But it's like, I don't know what all these concrete pipe yards were in Japan in the 60s, what the whole thing was. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why these were apparently all over the place, but fucking all these like long cylinders that you can shoot through and have actors move laterally across or go through and push the camera through. It just makes the fucking coolest geometric shapes in shots you will ever see. It's the best shit. I love it.
I love it too, and it's kind of like automatically you will get a good composition in that space because of the number of depth cues and geometric angles that these, you know, shapes give you, but also it's cheap because it's just a concrete pipe yard. There's nothing, no one's going to be there to bother you. It's just a bunch of concrete pipes lying around. If you have to rent the space, it's probably really easy, you know, just pay a little bit. It's great. But no, I loved this episode, and I love obviously, it's a very obvious why this is going to become a long-running plot trope, but the whole thing of the kids drawing their monster, and I love the way it develops. This one is a really good script of how the monster keeps getting pieces added onto it, and then I love the like design of the actual kaiju in the end, that the suit they've cobbled together reflects all of that, and it's just so much fun. The kid actors are great. You talked about in your notes about how good Jissoji was at like using blocking to like make the kids really stand out in the frame, and you're absolutely right. Something else I noticed in this one is Jissoji has a lot of interesting contradictions in his direction, where like he is definitely known for a lot of his interesting close-ups, but he is also someone who pulls his camera back and does long shots more than other directors, I think, and will like really show the space of a set and of people within that set, and that's something really cool. So he'll do both. The other thing is he's known for his like really amazing static shots where he's put the camera at an interesting angle, but he also does a lot of oneers. And in this episode, I noticed that he moves the camera a lot, and then he will also do like full oneers in conversation. So like there's a convo at the SSSP early in this episode where it's just a oneer going around the backs of the people as they're in a circle talking, and then sometimes it'll go into the circle to see their face, then it'll come back out, and it'll just cut in camera, it would be the term for that, of just reframing constantly in this moving shot. When you meet the kids at the beginning of the episode, he does all these whip pans to go from kid to kid, and that's one of the things that's great about Jissoji, is that for everything he's like, you could say he's known for, he'll also do kind of the opposite of it and mix it up, and it's never a static, like, this is the one thing he does. He's very fluent with all forms of camera work here.
Yeah, that's where the thing I said earlier, that the key for to be a great Ultraman director is how well can you shoot and make interesting 5 people in a room talking. And Jissoji was the best.
Yes.
It's why he was the best Ultraman director. It's because he was the best at doing that. And it's the things you're talking about, that he both has these like amazing shots. Like one of my favorite ones in this one is, I don't even know what this is. I don't know if he was shooting through a thing or if he put something around the lens of the camera, but where he has all 5 of the people in the HQ, but they're in a kind of like inverted rhombus shape, because most of the edges of the frame are all blacked out and it's just them crowded in the middle of it. And there's one later on where the whole bottom 2/3 of the frame are covered up by like a cubicle wall looking things, and you have the heads of the actors popping above those in the top third. So he has these really interesting compositions that create like really dramatic negative space and are doing kind of long takes there. But then you also have shots that are ones that you can't, that, you know, I have like my screenshot gallery I look at, and they're not screenshot shots. They're very interesting moving shots that are these almost like Spielbergian kind of oneers of these like conversations between a group of people. And I just say he's going around the back of them and moving the camera around them, or sometimes having the camera static and having actors in the blocking of the actors having them move to the back or coming up into focus and standing and shifting their positions to show the shift in the conversation. And he is just so expertly good at using all of those different methods in concert. That's not just one way he shoots those scenes using one kind of technique. It's that he's got like 5 or 6 major kind of techniques and he flits between them. And it's just makes those scenes so engaging to watch when they are the like, we got to have all the people together and talking the exposition to get the plot to move forward scenes that every Ultraman episode needs, because they have to do a whole sci-fi plot in 22 minutes basically, and you got to have a lot of exposition. It's like old Doctor Who. You just got, people got to fucking gab a bit to get the shit going on. And you need someone who can communicate that visually in a way that's really dynamic and interesting. And immediately in this episode, like, it's, that shit is so good.
100%. Love it to death.
This also has one of my favorite Hayata moments where the monster is attacking and he sees the kids and he goes running out into this like river made by a dam. He's like, kids, stop, no, come back. And it's the lamest Ultraman transformation ever because he basically trips and falls in the river and is like rolling around. And while he's covered in like those water pouring on him, he reaches in and pulls out his beta capsule and turns into Ultraman. Usually he turns into Ultraman because a monster is about to blow up one of the jets, or it's about to step on a building, or he gets like thrown away by an explosion and he has to pull it out. Here it's like, uh-oh, I tripped and fell in a river and I'm gonna drown, so I gotta turn to Ultraman really quick. And it's fucking great. I love Hayata. He's such a weird character because he has almost no dialogue and he's just this weird guy on the edge of scenes. And then he has to spring into action. And this time he's foot slipped when he sprung into action. And it's very funny.
It definitely feels like the character Moroboshi Don, who we're going to talk about from Ultra 7, is kind of inspired by how weird it's like, just make it text that he's a fucking weirdo alien. Yeah. Because Hayata kind of acts like that, but he is not. He's just a dude, canonically, right? But then you get to Dan in Ultra 7, it's like, no, he's canonically a fucking weird alien dude. And that works great.
Yes, absolutely. Like, it feels like they weren't sure how to write the protagonist character for the original show, but it ends up being very interesting. There's something I find very compelling about this weird guy who's just there, and he's not really a character. He doesn't have character traits really, but he's the one who comes in and saves the day. And again, it just really strikes me as being, he's the main character in the video game, and he just is a silent protagonist. But he's also the one who always has to save shit, and everyone else has to talk for him because he's never going to talk for himself.
Yeah. Awesome. You want to talk about the next one?
Yes, so next up we have episode 22, Overthrow the Surface, featuring the underground monster Talus Dawn. This one is where you can see that Jissoji watched Alphaville. And he's like, this shit rules. I'm going to do this in an Ultraman. Because this one also probably is, of these like episodes that are remarkable, is probably closer to the bottom in terms of plot stuff, but has some of the wildest shit he shot for his original Ultraman episodes. Both like throughout the whole episode, but particularly at the end when it goes sort of pseudo black and white. I'm not sure what you call that kind of color tone he's going for.
It's sepia toned. It's like lighter sepia, yeah. It's sepia that is like exposed in such a way that it is darker with higher contrast. But yes, I mean, one of the first things that's in your screenshot gallery is, and this is also obviously, you mentioned Alphaville, which is Jean-Luc Godard. This is a big Godard thing, but all of the reflections in sunglasses. I mean, it's amazing. He does this in the next episode as well. And one of the things you have to remember about getting a reflection in an object on camera is that that's not just how reflections naturally work. That's a hard thing to get in camera. You can't just have the actor in their sunglasses face the camera and naturally get the reflection, especially when it is as clear as it becomes a special effect if you want to get it really clear. And the ability to do that kind of stuff on TV when you are running and gunning to get this done is wild. And yes, this episode, I honestly do not remember the plot very well, but I remember the imagery because it's incredible.
Yeah, the plot of this one is just Anne, who is from Paris HQ. That's something I love about original Ultraman, is that the HQ is in France. And it's just like, it's great that it's not in America. I love that it's not fucking in America. And it's always when they need from HQ, it's some white person who's supposed to be French, but they're always speaking English, which is always a little confusing to me. But she comes down, but she's actually like a mole person, because this is a classic sci-fi trope. You've got the underground mole people who want to take over the surface. So this is kind of like the Pearl episode. On the page, it's a very generic Ultraman episode. It's, here's a secret group of alien / monster people. They want to take over the Earth. The big twist on the script level is the whole thing of Anne being an imposter at the beginning of the episode and her kidnapping Hayata because she knows that Hayata's Ultraman. That's like the big gimmick of the episode that distinguishes it from a more purely generic Ultraman plot, but that's not much of a gimmick. The whole episode really rests on, here for me, Jissoji's direction. Like you're talking about like the auteur thing, I think it's much more potent here because he just goes hog fucking wild. And you have the whole scene at the end that goes sepia tone where he is being the underground people are trying to brainwash Ultraman. And you have these just crazy close-ups from super low below of these scary white people in sunglasses. A lot of shots that you will see in some of his later episodes in Ultra 7. Like you have these very striking shots of empty seats in bleachers, because I think they're in some sort of sports arena or something. Is one of the things that also Jissōji episodes are so good for in particular, is he finds the coolest places to shoot in the weirdest buildings that they go and shoot these things in or in front of. Yeah, like that stuff just goes fucking bonkers at the end of this episode in a way I'm way into.
This episode, and it's the first of several I would say this about, was also very clearly influenced by Chris Marker's La Jetée, which is a French film that would have been pretty new at the time. It's 1962, and that's if you've never seen it, that's the time travel short film that is all done as still images, but those still images are fucking incredible, and particularly when you get into the sepia portion where you've got all the like men in sunglasses looking down and all of the harsh lights. That's all very La Jetée, and it's something you see in some of his later work too, but I love it.
Yes, but let's get into one of the best episodes we'll be talking about today, in my opinion, which is episode 23, My Home is Earth, featuring the planet-dwelling monster, but is he a monster, Jamila. This is maybe the most famous episode of Ultraman in Japan. It's referenced all the time. John, you will probably now start noticing as you're watching anime, it'll be like, oh, that's a Jamila thing, or you'll see Jamila. Because he's so tied into the plot, they can't reuse Jamila the way they can. Lots of monsters come back in later Ultraman shows. You can't really do that with this monster. But he's just super iconic. And this one just, I think this would, given to any like decent Ultraman director, this would be a great episode. But then you give it to Jissoji and it's like an all-timer. And this, of course, the plot of this episode is we have this monster appearing, Jamila, that is coming out of these like invisible flying saucers. And we learn that Jamila is not really a monster, that he is actually an early astronaut, basically, who has been mutated by space radiation or whatever. And he has come back to Earth for revenge and wants to interrupt this international peace conference that's happening. And this is one of the more clear examples of episodes we were watching today, but it's something that's true in a lot of Ultraman episodes where they really take Ide, who is the science advisor for the team, and make him the real protagonist of the episode, because he has to go from someone who is very gung-ho about, I'm going to make a science google thing to kill the monster, and then realize the monster is a thing created through the tragedy of science and this sort of endless pursuit of technological and scientific progress, and he becomes very resistant to killing the monster. And then once they do kill the monster in very gruesome fashion, that he suffers horribly because they realize he's been so mutated that water is violently painful and is basically poisonous to him. And Ultraman uses a thing that he has used in previous episodes before this, ones that we haven't watched, but Ultraman has the power to kind of spray water that he uses to save people because houses are on fire or something, and he sprays it down. Here he sprays down Jamila to kill him. And then you have one of the most iconic moments in Ultraman of Ide standing over the plaque that is constructed to commemorate this great astronaut and all the stuff. And he has this final line, which is, "This is how it always is for victims, only the words are elegant," and ends the episode that way. And this episode, I just think, is 10 out of 10. I fucking love it. It's so good.
11 out of 10. It's phenomenal. It's a masterpiece. It's the episode I wrote the most notes on. It might be the best of all the ones it's at least it's in the uppermost tier, you know. There are a couple others that I wrote similarly long notes on, like Nightmare of Planet 4, when we get to that one on Ultra 7. Hoo boy. But this one is definitely up there for me. I mean, it is a complete package, and it is a total directorial tour de force too. I mean, you have so many different, like, sets and areas and interesting things. Like, I just took note of so many interesting, like, shots he had. You know, you have there's a shot of everyone reflected in a car's rear view mirror at the beginning, and it's extremely brief, but it's obviously it's so brief, but it's so effortful because you can't just point a camera at a mirror and get an image that clear or composed. So like he does this for like a 3-second shot. You've got the whole explanation where they're using the bicycle spokes as like the metaphor, and it's shot through the bicycle spokes, which match cuts to a color wheel where he takes the camera from a crouching position up into a crane overhead the cast that is just wildly technically complex for what is people talking in a room explaining the monster. This is like explain why the thing is invisible and all of that stuff. It's wild. His episodes are full of shots of such conceptual and practical complexity that every single one of them would be the standout image for like anyone else in any other show, and they're all here. You have a whole scene in a forest that looks like it's right out of a King Hu movie with like in a bamboo forest. This is not a bamboo forest, but like it's that kind of shooting, the way they let light break in. You've got the foggy, misty noir lighting and camera work of all the nighttime exposition where we learn Jamila is the human, not just a monster. And then the destruction scene in the village that you have is every inch on par with like Godzilla films of the period. Just tour de force filmmaking. The way the camera observes the flames on the houses is transfixing and haunting. It's so good you completely forget and stop thinking about you're looking at miniatures. You know, it's that good in how it is. And just over and over again, this thing at the end where you talked about how brutal Jamila's death is, to me it's the way they have him in the mud, like sinking and like trying to climb out of the mud. And it's these just bravura use of close-ups to make him seem so pitiable. And it's really an object lesson in why the practical physicality of the effects matters so much. Like, Jamila is a monster you could not do in CGI because you need him to be in the mud, tactilely in front of us. And there's no way. There's lots of great things you can do today with CGI on kaiju. That's one that it needs to be in a guy in a suit because otherwise you wouldn't feel for it the same way you do in this episode. And then, yeah, I wrote down that line too, the "it's always this way with victims" line. It's just a top to bottom masterpiece.
Yeah, it's so incredible. Like, I mean, one thing that is really expertly done for that action climax, because this is definitely the best version of a monster fight in any of his more like kind of regular episodes, where it feels like the drama, and it's because Steve, it's not really that much of a fight. It's more of a like execution in this very brutal way. But the narrative drama is so potent in that scene at the end. And in a lot of Jissōji's other episodes, and I think this is sometimes due to some of his interests as a director, and also sometimes just the scripts he's given, the monster fight part is usually not the most interesting. Like in Ultraseven, all of the monster fights are like super abbreviated in his episodes, which is fine, but it is what it is. Here it is. There's something about how he has had this motif of this shot he's used multiple times in different kinds of shots around this to sell the location of the International Peace Conference, of showing all the flags of all these nations. And that so grounds the location that they then have on the miniature set, where they have the miniature versions of the flags and kind of intercutting between those to sell the kind of the place is the same between these two different locations, which just grounds things really well. And you don't have as much of the feeling you can sometimes get in these where the kind of miniature set and the location where the actors are filmed don't quite match up. And that's just the thing that can happen sometimes if you don't have really good planning on that level. And here, because it's such a distinctive location, I think he just so grounds and sells that sequence that then when you have Jamila die after being sprayed down and screaming basically in the mud, and then you have these powerful shots of all the flags having been toppled over by Jamila and they are covered in mud, which is obviously very powerfully symbolic of the blood and the dirt that is on the hands of all these nations that have been throwing human lives at the sake of this quote unquote scientific progress. And then you get just some of, I think, just these incredibly striking shots. One of my favorite shots in the original Ultraman, and I remember this from when I first watched the episode, is after Jamila dies, it then cuts to this shot where all of the SSSP are jammed in the top left corner with the sun behind a cross because they're at the memorial. But like it must be something like 85% of the frame is all taken up by the kind of grass and bushes on this hill that he's shooting down from this low angle, looking up and getting that sun flare or glare across the whole frame, and just how small and isolated the characters look, just jammed up into this little corner. And that presages the line that comes later of this sort of, it is kind of this beautiful, elegant plaque and all this stuff that they've erected, but what is it for? Like, does this really mean anything for the victims of what has been sacrificed in the name of this progress?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just all-time great episode. And then
all
this
right.
is followed
What's
up
next?
by another
by an all-time silly episode.
I mean, they're all all-time great episodes from here on. Episode 34, A Gift from the Sky, featuring the Megaton monster Skydon. This is another episode that is a very, like, he sets up a formula that all later Ultraman shows will do something with, where this is the formula for comedy episodes of Ultraman, which most shows have at least one of these, where it's less of a, like, sort of regular plot for an Ultraman show of here's this whole sequence of sci-fi stuff and some sort of, like, societal issue that the monster represents. This is, here is a big fucking heavy monster that has fallen to the ground. We need to get this monster up into space, and here are all the weird, wacky things the characters come up to try to do to get it back up into space. They have Operation Wirehook, Operation Autogyro, Operation Rocket, and then the alternate one, Operation Monster Balloonification, where they shoot a hose in the monster's butthole and put hydrogen in the monster through his butthole. And specifically, you have the captain, one of the all-time great Ultraman lines. I remember watching this with my dad and him just cackling when the captain points. It's like, aim very carefully for the monster's butthole. It's like, I will, Captain. But this episode is fucking hilarious, and it showcases, you know, that Jissōji's directorial virtuosity is not just for creating great drama, but it is also for great comedy, because his, like, one of the things Jissōji's real talents, and is true of a lot of early Ultraman directors, is he is so good at the use of blocking and how to use the human actors physically in the frame as objects and have them move as objects, less as like them delivering lines and giving that kind of performance, but them being moving geometric shapes that create frames. And it's like, this episode just has such great visual, physical comedy through the use of these actors. It is just, I was shocked at how hilarious I found this episode again, watching it all these years later. I'm like, this just is the best shit.
It's phenomenal. And it's honestly, it's one of the ones that most made me want to watch the rest of Ultraman, because it's like, if the Jissōji episodes have this much variety, then the whole show, it must be so much fun to just go from episode to episode and see what they're doing. Because it's kind of, this is the one that, like, this is not my favorite Ultraman episode, but it's the one that kind of proves the most how elastic the formula is, right? It's like, if you can go from, you know, the Jamila one to this one in the same series with the same core group of characters, that's a show that can do it. That's, at that point, you're in Doctor Who territory of, oh, we can just do anything. We can do whatever the fuck we want, because this is just complete comedy, and it is so good. The monster design is, like, so perfect for the comedy. I genuinely, I kind of don't know how they did the balloon effect. It's one of the rare times where it's like, I guess they just made an inflated version of it, but it looks so convincing of, like, this inflating monster balloon. It's so good. I love that. It's awesome. This is also one that I forget exactly which episode it is, but there is an episode of Evangelion, I believe, that just takes this structure of, we're trying this, then we're trying this, then we're trying this, and, like, doing the titles for each of them. And it's a great concept, because I just love, particularly, they get sillier as they go. You know, you've got Operation Autogyro of, like, let's just try to fly him out. And we're going to put the world's largest propeller beanie on him. And it's just so stupid, and it doesn't work. And it's great.
Yeah. And I do love that they have, because Operation Rocket, like, literally references the first Jissōji episode, the one with the pearls, because they tried to do the same thing they did with that monster. Because how they beat that monster is they shot a rocket up its butt. Now, they don't say it's up its butt, but it clearly is. And then fly it into the air, and then Ultraman blows him up for no reason, really, because the monster was defeated anyways, and Ultraman's like, I guess I'll just blow him up. But here it doesn't work, because the monster's so heavy, it doesn't lift him up. It just kind of shoves him along the ground, and all the members of the team are standing in the monster's path, and they have to run away. There's so many great moments.
It's Looney Tunes. It's Wile E. Coyote, right? It's like Acme stuff that they're doing. It's so good.
Because this episode is like, has a thing that feels like Jissōji's trying to one-up the crazy weird concrete pipe yard with these, I don't even know what they are. They're these like concrete barriers that are like basically shaped like big caltrops. Like, I'm not sure what they are or what they're for, but there's like a billion of them. And he just has all these great shots of like, after their first plan fails, they're all sitting on them at night in their big orange jumpsuits. And just like having all these adults sitting on these big weird concrete caltrops talking about what the fuck do we do with this monster is great. But then later you have this shot that's so good where it's the captain kind of peeking out from one of them, and you don't see anybody else, and he's like, all right, now everybody fire. And then everyone else comes out of frame, and you see that all of them were hiding in different spots behind these weird big concrete caltrops, and the slow timing of all of them slightly leaning out with their guns pointed and raised at the monster. There's just so many little moments that are great. I mean, he has the fucking freeze frame fake out, which is incredible.
Yes.
Where all the months they think they beat the monster because they made him to a balloon by putting hydrogen up its butt, and they all run towards the camera and go woohoo, and they jump up and it freeze frames, and then it smash cuts to a military base where they realize that the monster gets shot down by a regular fighter jet, so it's coming back down to Earth. And this is where you get an all-time iconic Ultraman moment that is parodied by so many Ultraman shows, because they're all in the middle of eating lunch, and they're all at the fucking table eating curry, basically, when they get the alert. And Hayata just runs out, stands up on the roof, puts his thing in the air, realizes it's not his beta capsule, it's his spoon. He throws it to the ground, reaches into his jacket, and pulls out the beta capsule. And the comic timing of it's so precise and so perfect. And there's now a running joke in Ultraman shows of Ultraman trying to go out to transform, but there's some mundane object he's holding, like a coffee cup or something. He's like, oh shit, that's not it. And he reaches into his back pocket or something and pulls out his thingy.
So I want to talk about that moment, and also as a transition into the next episode, which is the Monster Graveyard, because both of these had me thinking, because I'm an outsider to this. This is my introduction to Ultraman, effectively. And I would have thought a moment like the spoon for the capsule or the entire premise of the Monster Graveyard would be in a later Ultraman show, because that's the kind of like twist on the formula that it's kind of amazing the people making it had the like perspective and wherewithal to do in episode 34, not in, Ultraman Tiga 30 years later, right? Like it's the kind of thing that I think you would normally see if the formula had been around longer, but they're doing it kind of right away and creating this trope. And I think the best example of that is the Monster Graveyard, where that is if you don't know, the main idea of that one is that they're like, what happens when Ultraman throws all those monsters up into space? Oh, there's a monster graveyard. And that is such a genius idea. It blows my mind that that's in the first Ultraman show. I would imagine that's in like the 10th Ultraman show after there had been like, it feels like the kind of thing that like someone who worked on Ultraman after having grown up on Ultraman would come up with, because they had watched and like talked to their friends on the playground of like, what happens to all the monsters that go up into the sky? And they would come up with it. But no, it's in episode 35 of original Ultraman, and it's the coolest shit ever. And it's just stuff like that that shows how like on their toes these guys were in making this original show and having fun with the elasticity of the premise.
Yes, there's just the original Ultraman in particular is just such a intense font of creativity, where they are just inventing it as they go, and they're so clearly like kind of knowledgeable and kind of about what it is. As you're saying, they can do these things that feel more like kind of self-conscious that you'd expect from a much later entry after it has become a big franchise. But they are like immediately kind of like jumping on all these interesting ideas and weird spins on the formula and kind of satirical takes on themselves. And it is just incredible. And it is because I think it is such a powerful group of creators. Because again, we are highlighting specifically Jissoji, but I just got to really shout out specifically for Ultraman and Ultraseven. Those two shows, all of the writers and all the directors are so good. And you can just feel like how on top of their shit they are. And that's how you get an episode like Monster Graveyard. That is to say, it's such a great idea of Ultraman either blows the monster up or he goes and throws them into space. And when he throws them into space, where do they go? They all end up floating in some area in space that is the Monster Graveyard. And you just there's so much great shit in this episode where they decide to hold a monster funeral, and you have this great scene where it's like, one, they have to decide what kind of funeral it is, and they go for a Buddhist funeral. And you've got the like portraits of the monsters like it's a Buddhist funeral. And so you've got, including Gamakujira, the one from the Pearl one, and we also have the heavy monster from the last episode we talked about, as well as two others, Gomora, who's an early Ultraman monster, and Red King, who's one of the most famous. Red King fucking rules. He's probably my favorite Ultraman kaiju. But you just have their fucking portraits there. You've got some priest. But the best thing is you then have this whole sequence this sequence is the most Gainax thing ever. Like, this is the thing that created Gainax, as far as I'm concerned, is the whole scene where they're launching some moon rocket, and the way it's shot with this lady scientist and all these fucking dials and these weird close-ups and cuts, it's just like these really big close-ups on people with like big glasses, and it's just, man, this is the most fucking Gainax shit. It's like they're launching the Gunbuster or something. It's great. And then they launch this moon rocket, and then you find out that there's this monster Cibozu that's up in space, and it destroys the moon rocket right before it launches because it comes down. And then it cuts back to the monster funeral in progress, and all the lights come up, and you realize the monster funeral has just been held in the HQ. Because you think it's in they've gone to some temple or something, but they've just brought all this shit in the HQ, and all the lights come up, and everyone puts their shit back on and runs to the console. It's like, it's an emergency, and it's so good. Just the visual comedy of that reveal, and the use of lighting to sell it, because, Jissoji, one of his hallmarks is he has these, like, crazy lighting setups, where it's, like, super powerful lighting on the actors, and he basically blacks out the set, and that comedy of that reveal is just an all-time moment for me for the original Ultraman. I just remember laughing so hard that everyone's just like, uh-oh, no time for the funeral. We gotta get to work. Turn the lights on. Put your seats on, everybody. Let's go.
I loved this episode so much. Like, I can defend other episodes of Jissōji's Ultraman as more substantive. In my heart of hearts, this might be my favorite because Cibozu is my favorite monster. I wrote in all caps, Sean, this is a note in my notes, skeleton monster riding a rocket down to Earth. Yes, that is the most heavy metal shit I've ever seen. Fuck yes, make that an album cover. Fuck. And I love that image. I love Cibozu sadly walking away like Charlie Brown, dejectedly just like kicking rocks as he's walking because he's so bummed out into the sunset. I just wrote my notes that. I wrote, fuck yes, this is so good, all caps. You've got, this episode in its final half has all the like full-on Michael Bay lighting for the sunset sequences where it's just this hot, orange, baking everything with these like slight Dutch angles on everyone. It's so good. I love the whole final battle done as this like series of stills ripped out of like an otherwise normally shot fight sequence. And I just have to say, as someone who always prefers make friends with the monster stories to kill the monster stories, like not just I just mean in like fiction in general, this one was like right after my heart. It's so good. He's the monster out in the desert kicking rocks is so sad. I love him so much. Cibozu is my boy. This episode rocks.
Yeah, it's so good. Because it's even like the things that I think are technically flaws in the episode just make it more charming. Like the fact that the first like moon rocket launch fails because Cibozu like destroys it as he's coming down. Then they try to do a second moon rocket launch that fails because then they're like, well, what you have to do, we need to get this monster back up into space, which yes, they did do 2 episodes in a row basically. That was, we have to get this monster back up to space, but they're somehow completely different episodes. Like, it's so funny because they kind of have on the napkin the exact same premise, but they've just went 2 different ways with it. But that one fails because they can't get him to like get onto the rocket. And so then they have to do a 3rd rocket launch. And this one, they're like, how will we do it? Paint the rocket to look like Ultraman. And it's an Ultraman rocket. It's like, what is happening? It's like, there's like this whole middle section where it feels like they're just sort of spinning their wheels because they need to have the same scene happen twice. It's a very rare instance of the original Ultraman where there are 2 scenes where Ultraman fights the monster. But of course, that's to then have your final scene with Ultraman and Cibozu, where it's not really a fight. It's Ultraman's about to fight him, and then he's like, God, this guy's just a sad sack of shit. And I love that he like goes up to chop the Cibozu, and he's like, no! And he cowers a little bit. Ultraman's like, oh, okay, fine. And he just starts trying to shove his like, he's like a disappointed dad whose kid doesn't want to go to soccer practice or some shit. He's just like, go, get in the fucking car. Come on, I paid so much for these lessons. Come on, let's go. And the physical comedy of the two actors in the suits, of Furuya Bean, who is the suit actor for the original Ultraman, who's so good. Just like the amount of personality that's expressed is so phenomenal, and it is very funny, but it just sells the story so hard.
Well, because, the suit acting is not usually posed to look like a human being, right? It is posed to look like a big alien or a big monster. And I just love that they go full personification here, where obviously Ultraman gets to do a lot of that comedy, but also Seibozu, he's just a sad kid kicking rocks out in the desert because he's having a bad day. And it is so adorable. And again, it's another thing that's like, that has to be a guy in a suit. That is something that exists because you have that kind of special effect. And it is so wonderful. This episode it filled my heart. I loved it. I love the whole episode is the whole idea of it is dynamite. I love Seibozu's design, that he's just this sad skeleton monster. It's so good.
Yeah, he's a sad skeleton monster who just lives in the monster graveyard, It's like, this is where he wants to hang out, and he actually fell to Earth, and the only way to get him back up is to convince him to just hold onto a rocket really hard and shoot the rocket up into space. It's just such a great fucking plot. It's so good.
I mean, look, sometimes the SSSP, there are no good solutions for them. They are just human beings, and the best they can do is cobble together this kind of horrible idea, but it works.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, we used up all the hydrogen last week shooting it up the butt of the other monster, so we can't do that to Seibozu. So I guess you got to use the rocket plan, see if that one works out this time. I don't know. Does anyone know where they put the giant propeller beanie we put on the guy last time? Did that get lost? I don't know. I think it's time for the giant propeller beanie to finally come in handy.
This show is awesome, Sean.
Yeah, Ultraman, just an incredible show, and Jissōji directed some of its all-time best episodes, including its best episode, which is, of course, the Jamala one. All those other ones are great as well. And they didn't stop there. They continued making Ultraman, but it wasn't Ultraman anymore. They called it Ultraseven. So Ultraman was such a huge success. Again, like, you got 40% of the people in Japan watching some of those episodes. The TBS immediately was like, hey, let's make more of this shit. I think this is a good idea. And so they created the show Ultraseven, which was kind of like Ultra Q, meant to be here is a new take on this basic premise. So it is like, it ultimately becomes a thing in continuity with the original Ultraman, but it wasn't necessarily really pitched all that much that way. It's more Return of Ultraman kind of brings all these shows together. So Ultraseven, a brand new show designed to retain a lot of those elements of the original, but part of the premise was we want to also try to appeal to an older audience as well by incorporating more adult kind of sci-fi storytelling. Ultraseven also proves to be a tremendous hit, not quite to the highs of the original Ultraman, but you do also have to keep in mind, by the time you're to 1968, which is when Ultraseven finishes airing, the kaiju boom is starting to kind of wane. That's like where the Godzilla movies are not making as much money and stuff like that. The kaiju movies will only last for about 4 or 5 more years after that. And so I think it is not less popular because of quality. It is just like the trends start to shift over the course of Ultraseven's lifetime. But the quality of the storytelling of Ultraseven has forever embedded it as one of the best examples of the tokusatsu genre. Like Ultraseven, this one is one that I think people absolutely just should need to watch the whole show because it's so good. As a result, Ultraseven himself has really endured as a pop culture icon to the level to rival his older brother. Like, Ultraseven is very commonly referenced if you're going to get... It's either Ultraman or it's Ultraseven. Like, those are the two you're going to see referenced in Japanese popular culture. The most fundamental change to the formula made in Ultraseven is for the protagonist himself, who is Moroboshi Dan / Ultraseven. Rather than doing what the original show did, which is have Ultraman's power inhabit a human host, instead Ultraseven transforms into a human form of Dan, and he joins the Ultra Guard, which is the new team that is put together in their battles to protect the Earth. This allows Dan / Ultraseven to be a much stronger protagonist, and by that I mean just like he is a character that is very present and active in the episodes, and it gives him space to indulge in the more sci-fi mystery style plots that the show trafficked in. Dan uses his alien abilities and knowledge not just to fight the enemies, but also to investigate and unravel their nefarious schemes. The series ultimately focused more on classic sci-fi storytelling with ample social commentary and less on big kaiju fights, and we'll see that in some of our episodes, that they're kind of Some episodes have basically no fight, and it's more Ultra 7 blew up a little spaceship, and then that's it. That's kind of what Ultra 7's like. That being said, Ultra 7 did usually end each episode by blowing the monster up or a spaceship up, or if they were particularly unlucky, we didn't get any of these, he sometimes just violently decapitates them with his eye slugger, which is the big fin on the top of his head that he detaches and threads of the monster and cuts them into ribbons.
In episode 12, he cuts it in half. We do get that.
Oh, that is true,
in
yes.
that one, and I noted that because I noted like, oh my god, that's gruesome, and I wrote my notes, fuck, and he cuts the alien in half. Fuck yeah, that was an all caps moment for me.
Yes, like if you like the early Ultraman shows get very brutal. We ended up not having many of them. I didn't remember whether or not they happened in any of Jissoji's episodes. In original Ultraman, the main thing that he did, sometimes he cut people in half, where he could shoot an energy disc that's basically the fucking Kienzan from Dragon Ball and just cut a monster in half. But the big thing was they would put little like frills and things like that on the monsters that he would rip off. Like there's an episode of original Ultraman where they just use one of the old raggedy ass Godzilla costumes that had been in like 5 films, and they're like, let's use it for an Ultraman episode, and they put a little like frill, like a lizard frill around the edge of it, and that's a thing that Ultraman just brutally rips off, and they have some like red goop under it to make it kind of look like blood. So these old ones are very violent, and Ultra 7 could be particularly violent because one of his main moves is less the I'm going to shoot a big laser beam and more I'm going to throw a big like fucking blade basically at you and just cut you into ribbons, and it's fucked up, but it's great.
Absolutely. And yeah, I did watch the first episode of Ultra 7, which was the only one of these where I felt like, okay, I did need to kind of see the premise of this one, because it's the only one that is different in terms of who the Ultraman is, because the rest of them are all the premise of it's a human who has the power and he takes out the thing. This one is Dan. I would have noticed something is up with Dan if I'd been watching the other episodes, because he's a big ass weirdo, which I love. Dan is an awesome character, and I had to, when I was watching that first episode, Sean, I had to stop and text you and go, oh my god, Moroboshi Dan, that is like a Tomino level great name, and it really is.
Yes, no, and he's just Ultra 7 and Dan, like, he's my favorite Ultra. Like I just think the actor Moritsugu Koji is so good, and he's great in this show. But he's the one that they like to bring back because he has the most gravitas of all the old Ultraman actors. And so they reuse him in Ultraman Leo. In the stuff I'm watching right now, they keep on bringing back old people and doing old Ultraman stuff, and it's like that dude just is so fucking good. And it is just one of the things that makes Ultra 7 super fun is that having, and there are a couple of other shows that do have the similar premise of, in fact, the last one I just watched, Mebius, has the same thing of it is a Ultraman that disguises himself as a human, but retains all the alien qualities of being an Ultraman as the main character. And I don't think that should be most Ultraman shows. It should be just like every once in a while you break that one out. But when they do it, it's always great because it just is such a fun spin, and it makes the main character feel very different because you get, I think, a little bit more of that Superman kind of quality to the character where it's more than just he's strong. He has a different way of looking at the world that is informed by his kind of alien heritage. And I think it just, it allows the plots to be very different. And I think you see that in all 4 of Jissoji's episodes very much take advantage of that element. Particularly for this first one is when you just can't imagine the Marked Town episode being done with regular Ultraman. It needs to have this kind of alien protagonist to stand on the same level as the alien Metron, one of the most famous of all the Ultraman aliens that he has ever faced.
Absolutely. And this is a great episode. Obviously, we will talk about it a lot today because it is also revisited in Jissoji's final episode, The Unmarked Town. But it's great. It really immediately shows how different Ultra 7 is with this, like, it's kind of like a little bit of a detective story, and it's kind of, I wrote, this one goes full paranoid film noir, basically, because it's obviously all these people are, like, going crazy and doing stuff, and the camera work does all of the, like, paranoid film noir stuff. Like, one of my favorite shots is at the funeral at the beginning. The camera is this long take that is positioned behind, just over the shoulder of Dan as he's walking around illicitly listening to people because he's trying to get information. You could put that shot in a James Bond movie to be fucking great because it's like this spycraft thing going on. And there's so much of that in this episode, and it is just so moody, and it builds to probably the best effect sequence I've seen in any of these classic Ultramans, which is the sunset scene with the fight versus Metron, where it's just like, I don't know how, I would love to be able to visit that like soundstage to see how they put that all together, because it's and there's a little river in the middle of it, so they can do these reflections. It's unreal. It's one of the best effect sequences I've seen in anything, not just TV Ultraman, you know?
Yeah, that ending for this episode is very iconic, and like a lot of Ultraman episodes try to kind of use that as a template to do the kind of more moody battles. Yeah, like the sunset, and the river is the one that really sells it for me. There's something about the river with all like, little stuff in it and things like that that really just makes it feel like such a real place. And then whenever you can have cool reflections of the monsters in water and stuff like that, there's just something about that sells the sense of scale for me really well. And it communicates the miniatures as being a real location and not just like a bunch of toys somewhere. But yeah, this episode just nails, as you say, that film noir stuff. You've got that whole scene, one of my favorite scenes of this episode, just because it's shocking to be going back to it, is the one where one of the guys who smokes one of the cigarettes, because the whole plot of this is the alien Metron has basically doped a bunch of cigarettes that are being sold in this one town, and anyone who smokes the cigarettes kind of goes crazy and violent and starts attacking people, and the alien Metron's doing that to try to dissolve trust amongst the community so you can come in and to take over the town. And one of the first people you see is this guy who has a rifle. It's like an old World War II rifle, and he starts shooting at the police, and the Ultra Guard like are walking down and get stumbled into this like active police gunfight that's going on, and have to like use their ray guns to disable him and stuff. And it's just a really kind of shocking scene because it feels so gritty. And it's one of the things that I think Jissoji particularly has in a lot of his episodes, that you see it really starkly here, is how he melds the kind of near future setting that Ultraman has. Because basically all of the shows are always set in the near future. They're never set in technically that contemporary Japan. It's always some kind of aspirational, we're out into space and we're exploring the solar system and stuff like that. And here he's, that like, here's just a guy with an old surplus World War II rifle, like in the streets of a regular Showa town, doing just a full-on gunfight, and that the Ultra Guard stumble into is very, very striking to me. And again, gets that kind of gritty, more noirish detective kind of feel to it. And that, of course, that whole element of the blending of this kind of like the sci-fi world of the Ultra Guard with Showa Japan of the 1960s is really highlighted in one of the most famous scenes from this episode, one of the best, where Dan tracks the Metron down to this like one apartment complex or whatever, and comes into the room, and the alien Metron is there untransformed in his full alien glory, just a guy on a suit. And it's one of those great things where they can, of the like the sense of scale being played by how you film stuff. That's obviously just the same suit as what they're doing in the giant scenes, but they so sell that it's a human-sized thing. There's something I always love about that sense of like scale being different depending on the context of where the suit is. And Dan just sitting down at a table, and they're just sitting cross-legged and fucking just talking, man. Alien to alien, just one of them looks a lot more human than the other. And the surreal nature of that is so potent, and it adds to the mood and flavor of the episodes, I think, really, really effectively.
Absolutely. It is a filmmaking coup de grace, the whole thing. There's also a lot of James Bond in this one, where you have, particularly there's the scene at the Ultra Guard headquarters where it's all those like big white circles in the wall that they're standing in front of, that's a Ken Adams set. I've actually been rewatching all the 60s James Bond movies recently, and the most recent one to this episode would be You Only Live Twice. And it's like, that's where Spectre meets, and that's like the kind of set we have. Or like Dr. Strangelove could also be probably an inspiration here, but it's that kind of like exaggerated 60s production design that was so cool that you get in here, and it's awesome. But then it is also the flip side of that is just the location work out in the town and those little things. And when we got to that scene where he sits down and talks to Metron, and I realized we're doing the thing from Modern Protagonist, but seriously now, this is, this scene is not for kind of a laugh. And I was just like, I wanted to like stand up and slow clap. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. And it's something he'll do at least one more time, and it's always great.
Yes. And I always love it. Has done this shot. I think there's at least 2 other examples of this shot, but it's always great when he does it, where they didn't do this like reveal shot where they put the camera on the opposite side of where it had been filming this conversation between the two of them. And there's a wall that then slides back to reveal that the spaceship that the Metron has is just there. And that contrast of the kind of like dingy tatami mat room they're in with this 1960s future spaceship set that just is extended out there is so good. And again, like he uses this trick in a bunch of episodes later on, but I always love it. There's something so dreamlike about it. I think that some of this is in Ultra 7 where you start getting that dreamlike tone and sensibility to Jissōji's style becoming more and more prominent, which becomes obviously like a really big thing when we'll come back to his work in the 90s. I think you see a lot of it happening here in Ultra 7.
Absolutely. You mentioned in your notes, Sean, you wrote, the alien Metron should be grateful that Ultra 7 just blew him up because Ultraman Ace straight up split Metron in half vertically, causing all his guts to spill out like a Mortal Kombat fatality. And I went, it can't be that bad, right? This aired on Japanese television for children. And you had linked it because you wanted me to watch it.
Yes.
And I've looked at it several times now. If you haven't seen it, he splits it in half, and it looks like they broke open a pumpkin, and just it's like the guts of the pumpkin like dump out. It's so gross. And like obviously, it's not like graphic in a realistic fashion because it's a big, cartoony monster. But I'm like, how'd they get that on TV? Oh my god, that's crazy. This fucking series, I had no idea how nuts it was, Sean.
Yeah, Ultraman Ace has the most hardcore ones, because there's a later one in Ultraman Ace that it's not Ultraman that does it, but there's one monster, I forget what it's called, but it's like a big fish-looking guy who's got a big kind of like extended out kind of fish jaw, like a marlin or something. And there's this other very brutal monster that is beating on it, and it just grabs the lower jaw and just rips it off, like the whole jaw, and then a big strip of flesh going down its chest, and there's just like red goopy stuff that they put there, and it's like, and it starts screaming, and you're like, this is horrible. This is absolutely horrifying. Yeah, Ultraman just, and it's so funny because sometimes the conclusions are very, kind of, I don't know, chaste in the way they do it, of just like, it just blows up and it's just sparks. And then other times it's, I cut his head off and the fucking blood spurted out, or Metron, I split him down vertically through the middle and all of his guts spilled out. And it's just like, Jesus, sometimes Ultraman just is in a bit of a mood. It's like, I'm really gonna fuck you up. Like, you don't get to the little sparky blow up. I'm gonna rip you into little pieces. I'm gonna rip your arm off and stab you with your own arm. A thing he's done with multiple monsters before. It can be pretty fucked.
Does Ultraman Ace have a follow-up episode about the cleanup crew who has to come in and clean what I assume is like thousands of tons of monster guts just in this fucking river?
No, they should have, though. But I mean, but that is the thing in the unmarked town when we revisit the alien Metron, is they do have like the stitches down the middle of the guy. The two kind of, which I thought was funny because it's more a reference to the Ultraman Ace finish than the one from the actual original Metron episode. But I like the idea of like, we could just stitch him up back down the middle, and it's like you put like a coconut back together or something and glued it on.
It's great.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
This episode's awesome. The next episode, also awesome, but it is a little harder to see, and I think you should explain why before we talk about it.
Yes, so we're Ultraman, or Ultra 7, episode 12, From Another Planet with Love, featuring the alien spell, and if you're curious, that is, in Japanese, basically the same thing as the Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam song from the Aqua's Star with Love, just without the Aqua's part on it, it's which I find amusing. This episode is not available on any release ever in the history of the show. It has never officially been released, though it is accessible if you look for it online. The reason why is a little bit complicated. So there was a big controversy when it aired. To put it in simple terms, and I'm very much simplifying things because, this could be its whole fucking podcast, just getting into this stuff. Simply put, the aliens in this episode, called the alien spell, were given keloid scars, which are scars on the skin, and they're designed to make them resemble hibakusha, which is the Japanese word for people who survived the atomic bombs. And people who survived the atomic bombs may have experienced disfigurements, including those types of scars. Though, to be clear, that word is used for anyone who survived the atomic bombing, whether or not they have an apparent disfigurement or anything like that. Hibakusha at the time in Japan, and in some cases still today, faced severe discrimination and prejudice. Things of like thinking that they were, like, I'm going to be infected if I'm with someone like that. It's that kind of thing, like just a lack of understanding and a kind of ostracization of people who survived the bombs. And so this episode raised concerns with a victim group that supported Hibakusha. The main trigger really wasn't actually the episode itself. It was an editor for a magazine that's unrelated to Tsuburaya Productions published collectible cards in their magazine for Ultra 7 of the different monsters. And for the monster for this, they wrote Hibaku Alien in the description for the alien spell card. To be clear, the alien spell and this like creature from Tsuburaya Productions' perspective was never had that associated with it. It was never called the Hibaku alien, stuff like that. That was on the card, and that is the thing that caused the big backlash. The resulting backlash to this led to Tsuburaya Productions pulling the episode from reruns, and they have never publicly released it in any home release. However, the film was preserved, and through some, I'm not sure what the provenance of it is, but relatively recently, a very good version of it has been available online. There have been versions you could see for a long time, but in the past several years, there's like a more kind of proper master of it that is now available online that you can see with English subtitles and everything.
Yeah, I tried looking into that because it did fascinate me, because normally if something was pulled and not officially released, any kind of like bootleg would probably be pretty low quality, but it's roughly the same quality as like the Blu-ray episodes. It's clearly a film transfer.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how that happened. The closest I could find was that this was uncensored in certain foreign dubs of the series, and I do wonder if that's where like the film came from, and then maybe the audio is a different source. That could be very plausible, but I didn't look into it all that closely. But I would be interested to learn that too. This is an interesting one, because I think if you're not, honestly, even if you are Japanese, but you weren't alive then, you might not watch this and have any idea why on earth this would be pulled. This is not one where it's an obvious reason. So I'm glad you walked us through that, Sean, because if you're just watching the episode and you don't know about all that, it's not something that would strike you.
Yeah, and in relatively recent interviews, like most of the kind of victim support groups and stuff like that are not like, nobody's really calling for this episode to be erased from history or anything. And most people like involved in that space have said that it would be fine for it to be released again, as long as it had, a little piece of context in front of it, kind of explaining the history around that stuff. But Tsuburaya Productions has just never released it officially. There was a big call relatively recently for one of Ultra 7's anniversaries for that, and Tsuburaya still did not release the episode. Like, I don't think, personally, I mean, we don't have, obviously, any direct connection to any of those things, but yeah, as you say, like, there's nothing that you would say, looking at it offhand, that would seem especially objectionable. I
wouldn't. And I think in an American context, we would generally say you shouldn't pull an episode for any reason. I just don't think there's like anything that I would say should cause an episode to not be, especially if it's something you can just address with like a title card at the beginning, and you can say, we fucked up here, but here it is. This is history. This is part of the show. I would always put it out. But yeah, it's too bad it doesn't have an official release, because this is probably my least favorite of his Ultra 7 episodes, but I do like it a lot. It's very Jissoji.
Yes, I mean, you have all the stuff with the aliens because really what the aliens are basically vampires is what it really is, but the backstory of them is that they come from a planet that engaged in nuclear testing, and that has caused the aliens to need blood to survive. And so what they're really doing is they are trying to get blood of people. And so various women around this town have come down with this horrible case of anemia because their blood is being absorbed by these aliens that are kind of seducing these women. But then they find out that children's blood would be the most pure blood or whatever. So then they have like an ad campaign that's like, hey, do you want to see a rocket ship or whatever? It's like, come over here. And all the children show up. But you do have these crazy scenes with the aliens where they're in this like blocked out set that has like 4 lights directly above them and this like big vat of blood. That obviously is not actually blood. It's some sort of like red food color or something. But it is one of those, like, it's one of the most dramatic lighting setups he has in his pre-90s period Ultraman stuff, where it is just like, it is so extreme the way he lights that set.
Yeah, and that scene is the most obvious Lajete reference in his work that I've seen. If you've seen that film, there is a very famous shot of when the sort of people from the future in that story are introduced. They're people in these like big turtlenecks, and they're in the dark, and so it kind of looks like they're floating heads in space, and that is basically how Jissōji lights these guys, where it is this kind of like floating head in the black space with the single lights on top, and it's a really cool effect, and I love how he does it here. And it's just, it's very eerie. You also have a lot of his good diffusion stuff in this episode with the lights. You get that in the cafe scene where you've just got like, there's just enough diffusion on the camera that like even in the light coming off of like someone's glass full of like tea has these like diffusions coming off of it. It's really cool. This one actually had me thinking about wondering how much Jissōji and other directors in this period, because he's not the only one who did this, there are other Japanese New Wave directors who did some of this, influenced some of the people at KyoAni, because there's a scene in a cafe in this one that is 100% a KyoAni cafe scene of like the camera being anywhere but eye level with the people talking, and I love it.
Yeah.
And again, it's an aesthetic that we're pretty used to in certain animated stuff today.
Yeah. One thing I also really like about this episode is that Anne, who is the kind of love interest character, gets to do most of the detective work, which I think is cool, because they also bring back the actress who played Fuji, the main female part of the team in the original show, as the kind of guest star, as one of Anne's friends who is a fiance to one of the aliens or whatever. And there's a lot of stuff where I think the actress who plays Anne, who is Hisumi Yuriko, is also really good. And I love that she gets kind of more of a spotlight on this. You also get, talking earlier about Jissōji having always like really cool, weird places where he films. You have this awesome, crazy building that looks like they went to one of those concrete pipe yards and are like, let's make a building out of these, because it's like this big square building that has all these weird concrete circles that are look like those concrete pipes. It probably is using pieces of those jutting out of it, and you have just these awesome shots that are using that actual real world building, and it's just such a cool thing. And then of course they make a miniature replica of it in the big monster fight scene, because the monster explodes out of it. But it's such a cool like real world location they found.
The special effects in this one are also just like particularly excellent when you look at the quality of the miniatures that they've built and the monster fights. And then there's also this like animated stuff where they like draw on the film to like do all these like signals flying, and it's very avant-garde. It looks like almost a Stan Brakhage movie at points. But this one is, and you also have a big, sunset ending again, kind of like the marked town, and it is all just super impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good episode. Hopefully one day it gets like a proper regular release again with like the context and stuff around it, because I'm happy that it's available at all, because this is the kind of thing that normally you would think that it would just be lost to history, because this is we still don't have Doctor Who episodes from the same time that this episode came out. So
yes.
It's kind of a
luckily and luckily it exists in like quality on par with the rest of the episodes. So, you don't have to worry too much about it, which is nice.
Absolutely. All right,
let's talk about one of the weirdest fucking episodes.
Yes.
Oh, God, I love this so much, Sean.
Yeah, episode 43, Nightmare of Planet Number 4. This one is they basically took a Twilight Zone episode and made an Ultraseven out of it, where it is Dan and Soga, who's one of the other members of the team, are doing a test flight for automated space flight tests. So it's like let a computer fly your rocket ship, basically. And so they launch up into space, they go to sleep, so like, let's let the computer fly it, and then the rocket lands on a place that looks like Earth, but is it really? And this is the Twilight Zone piece of, they land on a planet that is Earth in the terms of they just found real world locations on Earth to shoot this, but it looks exactly like Earth, and it has humans, but it also has basically replicants, androids, things that look exactly like humans but are robots, and the robots are a kind of master class that are ruling over the humans who do all the menial labor. It's almost kind of, Matrix-esque in the sense of that the robots are using humans as an energy source, and they run the society. And they have fucking firing squads killing groups of humans. They're one of my favorite crazy details in this is they are filming movies in entertainment that it has like a big gunfight that you think at first is like, oh, they're filming a movie over there. And then later you realize, oh, they are literally shooting all the extras and killing them to shoot this movie. They are literally shooting this movie. And all those people are dead. And then at the end, there is a firing squad for one of the humans that helps Soga and Dan. They save her. Dan turns into Ultraseven and blows up all the alien spaceships. And then they go back to Earth, where everyone's like, man, the computer flight did, I don't know what all that shit. Maybe you guys fucking had a weird dream, but the computer sure worked well. Let's make sure we're using computers for all of our future rocket flights. And this episode is fucking great. It is very relevant in the year of our Lord 2026 with all the AI shit going on, because it is just about relinquishing humanity to the machine, and it is fucking bonkers. And one of the best things about it is I think it's one of the best looking episodes of Ultra 7, and it is easily one of the cheapest episodes of Ultra 7 also, because it has very little miniature work. The miniature work stuff is fairly cheap. It's like a bunch of rocket ships and stuff. It is all, they found fucking sick locations, and they have a sick script, and they have a sick director, and they're like, let's do this shit, and it's great.
Is this the only one we're talking about that doesn't have any kind of monster in it at all?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's pretty notable too. This one, just to talk about like Jissoji's, creativity and how much he can do with so little. This episode maybe has the creepiest thing I've ever seen in a movie or TV show. You know what I'm talking about, Sean. It's the Nazi dude chewing gum through the whole fucking episode that they've put way up in the sound mix, and you can't stop hearing it. And it is just this slow, grinding, mechanical gum chewing that just lasts over like at least half the episode just to freak you out. And you'll think you get away from it because Dan and Soga go into a different room, but then they come out and that guy's still there chewing his gum. And it's just, what a simple thing. It's just a sound effect foleyed into the mix. And it adds so much tension that when you add with like all the expressionistic sets they've got and everything, and all of Jissoji's weird camera work and all of that stuff, it's exceptional.
Yeah, it's so good. And I just think it's a great example of how if you have a really good script and a really good director, you don't need anything really fancy to sell the idea of like an alien world and an alien civilization. Now, obviously, the whole thing with the alien civilization is they look exactly like humans. But I think it is both like the locations they find and how Jissoji shoots it so sells the idea that there's something wrong about where they are and the place they have ended up at. You have like, in just weird little details, like they go to that gasoline stand, and then right by the gasoline stand is it's a red gasoline stand that right next to it is a red phone on a red little stool that someone randomly calls. This is a phone in the middle of nowhere. And it's just like, immediately there is this eeriness to where they are. And then you just have like these scenes that are like, the firing squad scene looks like it was shot in like probably a school gymnasium or something like that. But the way it's done with the use of dramatic lighting is so fantastic. It has one of my favorite sequences in a Jissōji episode, which is before the firing squad is getting ready. And again, they're going to kill the kind of main guest star of the episode, this woman that is trying to help our heroes get away, and her little brother is there in the stands, and he looks around, and you have these shots of the empty bleachers and all these empty seats, but you have this sound effect of uproarious applause over these shots of empty bleachers. And there's something so eerie and disturbing about it. And it's all just filmmaking, there's no special fancy effects going on there. It is just a pure filmmaking that is selling the emotion of this thing. And I think it's just a great example of what Ultraman can do at its best.
100%. There's one shot in this episode that I'm obsessed with. I loved it so much I took a picture of it off the TV and put it in my notes so that I could write about it. And it is when they go into the little room to meet like the leader of the robots, and he is sitting at a desk. You have Dan and Soga like turned, their backs are to us looking at him, and the room it's this big 4 walls, they're all white, and it stretches way into the background, and through a mixture of forced perspective and leading lines in the scene, it looks like the room gets smaller as it goes back. Yeah. And you have, sometimes when I teach intro to film, I will just put up images from a film, and I will put up a vocab bank, and I will tell students, like, apply these. Like, tell me, just raise hands. What do you see in this image? And it's a good exercise for getting people to think in terms of, like, reading the image. I don't think there's a single fucking vocab word in the book I teach out of that wouldn't apply to this shot, because there's so much going on in it, even though it's like, it's simple when you just look at it. But there's so much. Like, you have 6 leading lines stretching to the back of the room. You have 4 black lines on the top and bottom of each left and right wall. You have 2 lines of lights that are like these top, like, you know, flat lights at the top of on the ceiling, and they are stretching back. That all makes the whole thing, you know, it points backwards towards this back wall that is blank. And then the head of the guy who is in charge is inside, it's framed by that white wall. So literally you have 6 lines pointing to this box that contains the head of the guy we're looking at, and you have both Dan and Soga turning at him at an angle in geometric, like, parallel with all of those lines. That's a concept also known as frontality. And you have all of that leading to this guy to give us this immense sense that even though this is just a normal Japanese dude sitting at a desk, something is up with him. Like, that is phenomenal filmmaking, and there's no special effect or anything going on there. That is just getting the set. It's a very simple set, and then lining up the shot right, and it leaves such an impact. I can close my eyes and see every detail of it because it is so vivid to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And and there's something that sells the sterile and robotic nature of the society these robots have built, in the sense of, like, it is this massive, giant white hallway of nothing. That also, one of my favorite things about this scene is it is right next to another massive, giant white hallway of nothing that probably is just the same set, and they flipped where the door is, because they basically go from, there's one that it's the first one they're brought into with the Nazi general guy with the chewing gum. That is just the most fucked up thing anyone's ever done in any episode of anything ever, is this guy chewing gum over the whole thing. The door is on the left side, and they go through that door, and then it cuts to them coming in from the right side in an identical hallway that probably is the same hallway, but they just moved the door. But it is just such a great sense of, like, the eeriness of the space of this alien planet that is our planet. And then I love the ending of the episode, which sells that of everybody being kind of so sort of bemused by this thing that they think probably didn't really happen to Soga and Dan. They probably, you know, they hallucinated something, or they had a weird dream. And Soga and Dan afterwards kind of pondering about what this means for humanity. And then they ultimately, there's nothing they can do about it. And he flips his sandal, and they, like, make a bet on where the sandal is going to land, and they walk away. And there's just this ominous feeling that overhangs the ending of the episode, that this is the path that our world is on, is leading to this place where humanity has abdicated itself to this machine society. And that is, of course, again, it is exactly what we're doing. And it presages what his last episode, Jissoji's last episode, is about. We'll get to. But it is just something about watching sci-fi made in the 60s. And you're like, yep, you guys had it. Like, you were right. like you were right about where the stuff was happening. And to shout out one of the people I think is really big for this episode as well is the script. I think is fantastic, and it's written by Uehara Shozo, who is a big writer. He wrote a bunch of episodes in Ultraman and Ultraseven, and he becomes the head writer of the 3rd series, Return of Ultraman, which is another great Ultraman show. And so just to shout out that, you know, like that, I think element of the episode, the script is really, really sharp as well.
Absolutely. And we've got one more here, Sean. The Saucers Have Come, which is basically the Boy Who Cried Wolf episode, but they didn't really cry wolf because the saucers do come.
Yes, so the Saucers Have Come, featuring the alien Paralinga, which is one of my favorite alien names in all of Ultraman. Good. This one is remarkable for a couple of reasons. One, it's just an amazing episode. This is one of my favorite Jissoji episodes. But this is also the first time where we know that Jissoji basically wrote at least the draft of, like, what is the story of the script, if not really the script itself, because there are 2 people credited for the script. One of them, Uehara Shozo, which is the same writer I just mentioned, and then another person, Kawasaki Takashi, which is just a pseudonym for Jissoji. So basically this is Jissoji's kind of story. And I think you can see when we get to some of his later episodes in the 90s that there are a lot of similarities here, where he kind of creates a new protagonist that we follow. This is an episode that features very few of the main characters of Ultra 7 in a prominent way. So this is a story featuring this young man named Fuxin, a guy who spends all of his time looking through his telescope, one night looking through his telescope, he sees a bunch of flying saucers, which are just two bulls sat inverted, like one inverted on the other, which is the best and cheapest way to do a flying saucer effect. And as you say, it's Boy Cried Wolf. He tries to tell everyone the aliens are coming. He calls the Ultra Guard. Everyone goes to investigate. There's nothing there. And then this happens a couple more times. And it's really just like this character study of this young guy who's kind of down on his luck, living in a shitty little apartment with his neighbor across the way, who's this guy who's like just an asshole and is constantly banging on all this shit at night just to keep this kid awake because he doesn't like him, and the guy's drunk all the time. He's working at this like kind of dead-end job at this like kind of machining factory where you have this great shot of a lathe that I love, where the lathe is coming towards the camera, and as it comes towards the camera, it's coming into focus. And it's peeling the metal off and stuff like that. And then you have this like kind of odd young boy he keeps running into that Fukushima keeps kind of confiding these different elements of his life in. The boy kind of prompts him with these little questions, and he's this guy who kind of always has his head in the clouds, always looking up at the stars, always dreaming of some kind of brighter future, living in this very mundane life. And then, of course, it turns out that the aliens really are there, that people should be believing to him. And this boy is the alien Paralinga, and he offers basically, hey, I will take you up to space. I have used you to bamboozle the Earth because I've wanted to do this whole like Boy Who Cried Wolf scenario to make them drop their guard, but I like you. Come, I'll bring you up into space. But at the last second, Anne and Dan, who have never really given up on this guy because they always really believe that there must be something there. They realize the aliens are here. Dan turns into Ultraseven. There's a very crazy, very spacey, fucking surreal action sequence where he blows up all the spaceships, and then Fukushima ends up not being able to go into space and must return to his mundane life amongst the refuse and the wreckage and the trash and the garbage. There's a thing that's great about the ending of this episode is just how much it tells you with the visuals of what happens. I think this is just such a great episode. One thing that I put in my comments for my notes is this reminds me a lot, if you're an X-Files fan, it's a very Darren Morgan-esque, who is like the great X-Files writer, particularly his episode, Jose Chung's From Outer Space, where it removes us from the main cast. We adopted this kind of regular, mundane perspective, which gives us a very different look on the world of Ultraman, or in this case, Ultraseven. And it just gives you such a different world to explore. And again, that sense of the mundane of this sort of regular 60s Showa era Japan juxtaposed with the futuristic world of Ultraseven, and this guy dreaming of being able to touch that kind of world, to live this kind of life, to be amongst the stars. But that's something that seems forever out of his grasp.
Absolutely. It's really, really cool. And it's something that, as you said, in his 90s episodes, this will really kind of more become the default of just telling a standalone story outside of the normal Ultra cast of whatever that show is, and having kind of a new protagonist for us. This is a particularly good protagonist in Fukushin. And I love the monster as well. This is another scene that just tickles me because episode that tickles me because you have Paralinga just in his apartment. He shows up and he's the boy, but then he's Paralinga. And he's just chilling in his apartment being like, you can come to space with us. And that costume is so good, and it's like got this weird red-green mixture. I love the texture of it. It looks so good in person. It kind of looks like Creature from the Black Lagoon or something, but like colored red and green. And that whole scene is great. I love you've just got him like putting an arm around him, and as he's in the monster suit. It's, again, this is just something he keeps doing in these episodes, Jissoji, and it's so cool. And then the effect sequences in this one are really experimental. They're very avant-garde. Like, they kind of remind me of the first sequence of Fantasia, with kind of its like abstract imagery. Or there's a short film by Maya Deren, who's one of the famous American avant-garde filmmakers, called The Very Eye of Night, where she films like this ballet company doing this dance, but she shoots it in the negative, so it's all like, white exposure, and then it is double exposed over a like star field, and that's kind of some of the kind of stuff they do here, where it's these very weird like star field projections as Ultraseven is up fighting the aliens. It's really cool stuff, and it makes the ending really distinctive in terms of the climax before we come back to the very, severe mundanity of the trash and the refuse, as you say, Sean.
Yeah, and there's something, that's just so good about this episode, of the contrast of those, like, the weird, fucked up, spaced out effects. Like, you have that one really kind of strange scene of Dan and Soga in the spaceship where it's supposed to be they're in space, but you have all these lights that are out of focus, and you have this like kind of bokeh effect on them. That they're supposed to be stars, but they don't resemble stars at all. And so this very kind of like almost like impressionistic kind of scene. And then you have that contrasted with these very mundane scenes filmed on these like actual locations. And again, I think Jissoji just finds the best locations. Like this one scene where Fukushima is on this just big hill of dirt that has some of those mysterious stone concrete pipes that Japan was just filled with in the 60s, but they're all like destroyed and just discarded, like they've been kind of dumped here. And he's just leaning on the side of this big dirt hill. You have all the stuff, of course, at the end with him riding his bike through this big trash pile. And I think this just so communicates the contrast of the world this guy wants to live in that's out of his reach, and the world that he seems to have no choice but to live in. And that sense of that everybody at the end treats him like a big hero and is celebrating him, and the Ultra Guard comes and personally takes him home and thanks him for his good hard work, but he is still left there just on his balcony staring up at the stars that are still out of reach. It's such a, I don't know. It's an episode in a story that I think like really has a sense of mood to it that's so different than any other episode of Ultraman or Ultra 7.
Absolutely.
All right, so ready to move on to making a big jump in time and talking about some Ultraman Tiga?
Absolutely, and all the history leading up to it.
Yes, so from his work on Ultra 7, which blended, as we were just talking about, the fantastic with the mundane, Jissoji earned a strong reputation and even earned a term Jissōji magic, which described his unique aesthetic. Jissoji moved away from the tokusatsu genre, though he occasionally submitted story ideas to later Ultraman shows, and he eventually left TBS in 1970. Jissoji became a free director, working on both TV shows and movies, and established a small film production company called Kodai Group, which he operated with art director Ikiya Noriyoshi as the CEO. Perhaps most notably in this period, he directed a trilogy of erotic films from 1970 to 72 called Mujo, Mandala, and Uta, with Mujo winning the top prize at the Locarno Film Festival. In terms of his tokusatsu work, in 1988, Jissoji returned to the genre in very dramatic fashion by directing what was at the time the most expensive tokusatsu film and what was a really big hit, which is an adaptation of the cult classic novel Teito Monogatari, which is known as Tokyo the Last Megalopolis over here. It's a very interesting film. I watched it the other day. That's of course, it's like a early 20th century Japan, where it almost has a bit of like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen thing of all these like historical figures and sort of like pseudo historical figures kind of all intersecting in the story of Japan at the turn of the 20th century. It's very cool. I'd recommend checking it out if people are interested in that. But Jonathan, you included a note here about his most famous thing outside of Ultraman, which is that trilogy of movies.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention, I just found that the Last Megalopolis movie does have a recent Blu-ray release here from Media Blaster, so I might have to pick that up.
Yes, that's what I thought that. It's a good
Okay,
release.
cool. Yeah, the Blu-ray of the erotic trilogy, which is also usually known as the Buddhist trilogy, that had a Blu-ray release from Arrow Academy a few years ago, and I remember this was before I knew anything about his relationship to Ultraman. I looked at that several times and was like, I should probably pick that up. That looks interesting, and I never did, and now it's super out of print, and I'm mad at myself because I would love to see that. But I just wanted to note that, like, if we're putting Jissoji in Japanese film history, he is 100% part of the Japanese New Wave movement, a la directors like Suzuki Seijun, who we've talked about a lot, particularly in our Lupin conversations, or Oshima Nagisa. The Buddhist trilogy, the erotic trilogy, was an ATG production. ATG, which stands for the Art Theater Guild, was the most central and sort of important organization in the Japanese New Wave, beginning in 1962, where it was just a foreign film distributor. It would bring films from other countries and play them in Japan. But then it started making its own original films in 1967, and that period of 67 through about 1972 is basically the prime years of the Japanese New Wave. That's where Oshima does a lot of his most famous work. It's all with ATG, as does Yoshida Yoshishige, whose work is probably the most similar to Jissoji's if you want to see another filmmaker from this movement. Yoshida's defining film is Eros plus Massacre, which is one of the most acclaimed films of the Japanese New Wave, and that was also an ATG production. And if anyone who likes Jissoji, they should check that movie out, because there's a lot of interesting similarities, particularly to his 90s Ultraman work, because it also has this interest in, like, stagecraft and multiple forms of storytelling kind of blending into film. It's very political. And you can just see a lot of the Japanese New Wave stylistic traits and thematic interests in Jissoji's work. The camera angles and and visual experimentation, yes. But particularly, as I said, in those revival era shows, when you have stuff like the Kaiju Play episode that presents itself through the medium of theater, that kind of like media blending is a really central gesture of a lot of Japanese new wave stuff. I think Suzuki Seijun, who we've talked about a lot, is clearly like a stylistic cousin of Jissoji. And I think particularly when you get into these more dreamlike episodes Jissoji has, it reminds me a lot of Suzuki's work, like that episode of Lupin the Third Part 3 that he wrote that is just absolutely buck wild insane. I thought about that a lot while watching particularly the Planet number 4 episode. So it's just something to keep in mind, because like we're talking about him in the context of, this TV, kaiju show, this tokusatsu show that he did, but he really is a card-carrying member of this major, like, film artistic movement too, that I think he brings into Ultraman and also brings some of that inspiration out into the art film world. And it's a super fascinating career. Probably like a truly like understudied director in English, when you look at all that stuff together.
Absolutely. And I think, it is important to keep in mind that context of like, in reality, we are skipping over the vast majority of his career, because this is where his career is, right? Like Ultraman is where he starts, and he, that's where he gets his kind of first like real directing jobs, being able to do those episodes. And then he goes and he has an entire career doing a lot of TV, doing these movies, and with only like really big commercial thing he did really being that Taito Monogatari film, which is just kind of crazy. And when I've been doing some of the research for our Japanimation station, I've been going through some of those scans of old New Type magazines. I got to the point where they started promoting that movie, and that magazine was all over that fucking movie. And they're like, the guy from Ultraman is directing it. It's crazy. Which is very fun. But yes, he had a very big, healthy, big, long career. And while Jissoji was having a big, interesting artistic career outside the confines of Ultraman died its first death. So the franchise for Ultraman after, it's really after Ultraman Ace. So it's like once you kind of get into the mid 70s, it starts struggling a lot. With the rise of popular anime like Space Battleship Yamato in 1974, the kaiju boom basically ends. That's 1974 is when Godzilla has its last movie before it comes back. And so the kaiju stuff, it just is not popular anymore. Anime just eats all the kaiju genre lunch. And so Ultraman makes one last big effort with a full TV show in 1980 called Ultraman 80, which is a very interesting show for its first core, where they try to have Ultraman be a teacher and be Ultraman, and then they give up on that and make it a generic Ultraman that's not very good after that point. And then after that, Ultraman is basically gone outside of reruns and weird kind of one-off things on the fringes and stuff like that. However, by the late 80s, the kaiju genre starts to come back. You have 1984, The Return of Godzilla, and that kind of starts slowly bringing the genre back, and other people start making movies in the late 80s. And Tsuburaya Productions decides it is time to bring their big boy back. It's time to bring back Ultraman. So in 1996, Tsuburaya Productions releases Ultraman Tiga, a brand new entry in the franchise, in something that revolutionizes the franchise for a brand new era. And Ultraman Tiga is a massive hit. As part of their efforts to bring the series back, Ultraman Tiga did also decide to bring back the franchise's most well-known director, Jissoji. Jissoji's style had become so associated with Ultraman that multiple home releases had come out at this point, collecting specifically just Jissoji's episodes. And there had even been a movie in 1979 called Jissōji Akio Kantoku Sakuhin Ultraman, or director Jissōji Akio's Ultraman, which just compiled and edited sections of his different episodes into a theatrical release. In returning to the series, Jissōji produced his episodes effectively just through his Kodai Group, so his own film company, bringing many of his own crew members and things like that from his company with him to make the episodes. So the production of the episodes are different, and you can see that if you look at the credits for his Tiga episodes compared to other ones, all the names are different. Jissoji also wrote the original draft for every script he directed for Ultraman, for Tiga, Dyna, and basically for Max as well. And so he is in charge of the stories as well from this point forward. To talk about Ultraman Tiga itself as a show for just a second, because it's a great show. People should watch it. Tiga's fucking awesome. It revolutionized the Ultraman franchise by retaining the fundamental core concept. It still has a pseudo-military science group which defends the Earth from monsters and aliens, and one of the members of that group is the host of Ultraman, but it also brings in a more modern focus modern for 1996, on character and character arcs. The series established a new continuity where Ultraman was a relic from Earth's ancient history rather than the coming from the land of light from Nebula M78, and he is resurrected as monsters begin to invade the Earth once more. And I feel the show strikes a perfect balance between classic Monster of the Week episodes and a sense of a larger plot line that the show builds towards its phenomenal climax. The end of Tiga is just incredible. The last 10 episodes of Tiga are just all-time great. Ultraman Tiga serves as a model for all future Ultraman shows, at least I can say up to everything from 2008, which is what I've watched, to follow, which preserves the heart and structure of the series while still accommodating more modern storytelling trends. Tiga is, to this day, one of the most popular and beloved Ultramans in the franchise. However, we're not going to talk about any episodes that are regular Ultraman Tiga episodes. We won't really be touching on that side of it all that much with what we're talking about today, but we are going to talk about 2 fucking killer episodes of Ultraman Tiga regardless.
Yes. So Ultraman Tiga is basically like the Mobile Suit Gundam seed of Ultraman, it seems like.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a relatively good comparison point. You know, they got a hot guy to be Ultraman instead of an old middle-aged dude like the old days. They made it sexy again for people. I think Gundam, if you're making the Gundam comparison, Seed is a good comparison. And we'll talk about Seed Destiny as another comparison with Dyna as well.
Well, there we go. So yeah, I mean, this first episode, we have 2 episodes here, Flower and Dream. Flower featuring the alien Manon, which is basically, this episode is great because it is narratively pretty threadbare. It is just an excuse for Jissoji to go absolutely to town on the mise-en-scène and the direction. And having this whole episode where it is about, a kaiju and a monster battle and all of that stuff through the lens of the cherry blossom blooming, the flower viewing festival, and then also through stage play, which is going to be a major theme in his work going forward with Ultraman, where, the final part of the battle is done on a proscenium, and you have all of this, classical kind of Japanese music and instruments underneath it and all of that stuff. It is just a visual tour de force, and it is so fun. And it really, it makes sense that he would have drafted the story of this one, because it really feels like it is a set of aesthetic justifications for what he wants to do visually, and it is so good that works beautifully.
Yeah, it's one of the things for Flower in particular, I think is just a very fun episode, is that on the paper, given to any other director, this is not enough of a story to be an episode of Ultraman, right? The whole plot, if you're just looking at the plot, is nothing's been going on much. Everyone decides to go have a party and do flower watching, Hanami, the cherry blossom petals. And so they all go to that party, except for their main hero, Daigo, who is Ultraman Tiga, has to stay at the base. There are some aliens there. The aliens decide to kidnap the captain. Daigo turns into Tiga and saves the captain. That's it. That's the whole plot. It isn't enough of a script to fill an episode of Tiga in a regular context. But here it is just used as this way to explore the aesthetics of traditional Japanese culture, right? It's using that kind of Hanami basis to do that. You have all this commentary where you have Munakata, who is the kind of second in command of the group, who he is talking to Reina, the female hero of the show, about classic Japanese poems and stuff like that, and admonishing her for not being read up on these poems. There are references to several classic Japanese stories here in this episode. You have these crazy cutaway shots to these Buddhist statues that are used throughout the episode. You, of course, have the ending, the whole ending that is done in this kind of pseudo kabuki style with the fight at the end where they're on the stage. And so it is this interesting way of using this framework to just explore the aesthetics of traditional Japanese culture through Jissoji's unique directorial lens.
Absolutely. And it's a really distinctive episode visually. It also, I think this is the first Jissōji episode where the actual Ultraman versus the kaiju battle is as aesthetically interesting as anything else he's ever done, right? This is where he really levels up that. And you have one part that's just all framed kind of below the moon, and the moon is in the upper space in kind of this negative space, but it looks like a lot of old Japanese paintings you've seen of Hanami viewings and stuff like that. And then that transitions into the part that's on a proscenium, and they're actors in a play, and it's kind of kabuki. It is so cool, and just to see all of what could be, as you said, a very threadbare, standard sort of skeleton of an Ultraman episode, but done with this sort of maximalist aesthetic approach that is all themed to this seasonal party and Japanese culture and all of this stuff. It is really, really special. This is also where you start, he doesn't do this as much in the old episodes, but here with like the digital photography, he just straight up brings a bunch of Vaseline and starts rubbing it all over the lens. And he does this in all of his 90s into 2000s episodes, where he'll just, and it's strategic. He'll not do the whole lens. He'll matte parts of the image into a soft blur by doing something on the lens, but then leave other parts in sharp focus. And it's a really striking effect. You also have a lot of distortion on light sources that, go beyond the typical diffusion. It's really, really cool. And, completely insane. And I love it.
Yeah, and I think one thing it really highlights when you look at this episode and contrast it with the later ones is that the blur and the Vaseline element is so strategic. It is so intentional. And I think you can tell it anyways, but like you can tell because here it's used very sparingly. It's mostly used in the Hanami scenes, but the Hanami scenes are also when the characters are getting drunk and where the aliens are starting to kind of prey on them. And so it communicates that sense of this bit of daze. And then it's much prominent in his later episodes we're going to talk about, because almost all those episodes take place in some version of a dream world. And so there, the sense of reality being distorted and blurred and off contributes to that tone. And I think like that contrast here of where this is mostly not set in a dream world until you get to the end and you're in like totally theater land is really interesting. And then another element, again, I mentioned earlier, but the cutaways to those Buddha statues that are lit in this very dramatic fashion, I think is also just a super potent element of this episode. The sound design of this episode is very striking, where there's a lot of like empty sound where there's not much playing and things have a kind of a slight echo effect put onto them. And it's very disorienting. There's a very kind of strong horror undercurrent to this episode, with those cutaways to the statues, with one of my favorite shots, which is as things in the Hanami party start going odd and the captain walks away and is going to be kidnapped, you look back over to where there are these two other people, one of whom, by the way, is Jissoji's wife, is one of the two actresses that are playing the human forms of the aliens, and they're just gone, and the like top part of the costume for the alien, which is this weird head with these like fingers sticking out the side, is just laying there on the ground where those two people used to be. It's one of his more unsettling episodes that has a bit of that more horror tone to it, which I think is quite cool.
Absolutely. It's honestly, we talked about Throne of Blood earlier with Tsuburaya working on that. Yeah. There's a lot of Throne of Blood in this one, particularly in the scenes under the cherry blossoms and stuff, and the way he uses fog machines and whatnot. Kurosawa never directed anything quite like this in color, but there's a Kurosawa quality to some of that, dreamlike content.
Yeah, that's a good call. I do think Thrones of Blood is a good comparison. One anecdote I want to shout out about this episode, because one thing with Jissoji is by this point in his career, he has totally become like a weird, cantankerous guy with like a bunch of his he exists in his own world at this point very much. And so one anecdote about this is they were originally going to film those Hanami scenes on location at like an actual place with real cherry blossom trees for the first day of filming for the episode, but Jissoji did not show up that day. They called him and he said, "I'm not coming. We're not filming today." So ultimately they needed to build a set on a soundstage for those scenes, as by the time Jissoji was ready to film them, the blossoms had wilted. And just like incidentally, I very much believe this because this is not the only anecdote I saw of Jissoji in this period of his career where he was just like, "Oh, no, we're not filming today." And not giving any explanation for why, and everyone being like, "Oh, okay then." And he just seems to be a guy who very much he needed to be in the right mood and headspace, and everything needed to be aligned correctly. And if it wasn't, he's not going to do it. And honestly, I think like it ends up working better for the episode. I think the fact that it is, because it's very clearly a soundstage. Like they could have made a more convincing stage than this. It plays into the theatricality of the whole thing. And so I think it honestly works better that way. But I can very much believe that they had originally planned it out of, hey, we can schedule the filming correctly and we'll be good. And he was just like, no, not on this one. We'll do it later.
It's, I love that story. And it's also just like, what are they gonna do? Gonna tell him no? Yeah. I bet everyone working on Ultraman Tiga worships this guy, because if you're a big enough Ultraman fan to be working on the new show, you probably adore his contributions and are like deeply indebted to them, right? It's just like, okay, Yeah, go for it, Jissoji. Do what you gotta do, I guess.
Yeah,
it's very
and keep in mind that basically all of the crew filming this, like the behind-the-scenes production crew,
Are his people,
all
yeah.
his people. So it's like, very much they're going to do whatever he says. And one other thing on his kind of like the eccentricities of older Jissoji is at this point he has also developed a thing where he brings this little raccoon stuffed animal to the film set called Chinabo that he has cameo in almost everything he was making at this point, and so it's in almost all of these Ultraman episodes. So when he has these,
I was going to ask you about that little thing. Oh my god, I didn't know it was like. Oh, that's amazing.
Yes, it is. He has this little stuffed animal raccoon named Chinabo, and he just brings it to the sets. And for the Dyna episode, he has a little Super Guts uniform that says Chinabo on it, which is just the most basic thing. And so, yeah, if you're watching these episodes, it's like, why is there a stuffed raccoon in all these episodes? That's why. It's not just these. In other stuff he directed around this time, Chinabo is in there as well. So if you want to go watch Jissoji's other 90s era material, you can go Chinabo hunting.
Okay, this is that sounds like the name of the biopic about Jissoji that they would make. Chinobo hunting. It's like Goodwill Hunting. All right. Let's talk about the first Jissoji episode called Dream,
yes.
But by far not the last that is about dreams.
Yes. So episode number 40 for Ultraman Tiga is the episode simply titled Dream, featuring the monster Bakugon, which a little behind the scenes thing is that is one of Jissoji's Ultra Q scripts that he wrote but never was made into an episode featured a monster called Bakugo that was going to be a dream thing. Obviously, it's not the same plot. He just kind of took that idea. And this one is very much like his last Ultraseven episode, where he has created a brand new protagonist, Ikeda Kazuma, who is this guy totally down on his luck. Nothing's going good for him. He's got this girlfriend that he bought opera tickets for. And the day he's going to give her these expensive opera tickets, she's like, I don't want to go. In fact, what if we just were broken up and we just never saw each other again? He's like, oh, okay. And he has just kind of shitty life. But every time he goes to sleep, he dreams of a monster Bakugan that is stomping around. And in the real world, Bakugan is there and he's stomping around. And so our hapless hero is at first unaware of this. You have this great scene where he goes to a psychotherapist, but the psychotherapist is just is a fucking, quack, is trying to sell him all this shit. And he just gets totally duped by him. And then he eventually figures out and realizes, oh, every time I go to sleep, this monster starts attacking. And so he deliberately gets really pumped up, goes to sleep because he finds out that his fiance or his girlfriend was cheating on him and is now, engaged to another man, and he wants the monster to basically just fuck everything up and ruin that lady's life. And our heroes manage to find and apprehend him and stop that before it happens. And it ends the episode with him being taken away while him saying, please, can't you just let me dream?
I do have to say, I don't really understand why they had to arrest the poor guy. It's not really his fault. The cosmic rays are fucking shit up. He didn't. I don't really know what legal standard are they going to hold him by. I don't think this is a prosecutable offense. I felt like there's a bit of a miscarriage of justice at the end there. But I do have to say, the climax of this episode being Daigo, our Ultraman for this show, just pulling off to the side of the road and leaning his seat back and going, let's go to sleep, because he realizes as Ultraman he can't actually hit the dream monster. So he's like, what if I fight him in my dream? And then they do a dream battle. That idea is so fucking rad, and I just love the image of Daigo pulling over going, this is as good a spot as any. And then the joke at the end of everyone going Daigo, you were asleep during the monster battle, you asshole. That's so good. I love that.
Yes, I love that moment as well. It's very the actor who plays Daigo, I love, Hiroshi Nagano, who again, he was a boy band singer and stuff like that. And so he's this cute guy. But he
you don't say. You can tell.
Yeah. He has this very ethereal quality to him, to his acting that I think works for the character so well. And he totally sells this idea of here we go. He's just leaning back in the seat and going to sleep. And it's something that I don't know if other Ultraman actors would have been able to pull that off as well as him, that it just feels totally natural that he would just do this. But I just love this episode. You have all just the stuff of this guy's life is just so great and horrible for him. The scene where he buys those tickets for his girlfriend and she's like, you know what, why don't we just break up? And he's just left there alone in the restaurant. You have the whole crazy scene at the psychotherapist's office that is almost entirely shot in reflections. You have all these great shots where there's this like square glass table that is perfectly reflective, and you have this conversation between the two of them shot in that table until the guy, again, who is like, you know, trying to dupe him into buying all this shit, just gets very aggressive and starts grabbing onto him and knocks the table over, and the reflection goes all crazy. Is phenomenal. Like, there's just that sense of the comedy of the dream world of this thing, and this guy kind of sleepwalking through his life and nothing going for him. Is phenomenal. And this is where you get some of that, like the classical music, the Sleepwalker song that is used here, La Somnambula, which is, they show the CD in the episode for. You get that use of classical music is just so perfect, and it is a truly phenomenal episode of TV.
Yeah, it's another one that is like, it's fun, it's incisive in kind of how it comes into its satire. It's very good, and it is surreal. Just a pleasure. Like, man, imagine being someone who had grown up on the Jissōji episodes, and then Ultraman Tiga comes back, and you're probably feeling great anyway, because it's a great new Ultraman show, but then you get these two near the end of the run. That would be so cool, you know?
Yeah, and it's just a phenomenal episode. And one cool little anecdote for this one is that there is a cool cameo in this episode of a fairly young Tadanobu Asano in his 20s. So the young guy in this episode, there's this running joke of this guy whose phone call keeps on being interrupted by the monster. And that is Tadanobu Asano, who's, of course, now a very big star. At the time, you know, not as big a star as he is now, but he was very well known in Japan because his debut work was, he was one of the students in the third season of the beloved school drama in Japan, Kinpachi Sensei, which incidentally served as one of the main inspirations for the show Ultraman 80. And Tadanobu had expressed an interest in working with Jissoji, and so they brought him in for this episode and had him film like these little cameo scenes. But I did not recognize him because I've only seen him in more modern stuff where he's obviously much older, but I thought that's a cool little thing.
Yeah, Tadanobu Asano, if you don't know, I mean, I'm looking at his Wikipedia page right now because I've seen him in a million things, but I was just like, is there one thing I could name? And I'm like, there is not one thing I could name because he's been in everything.
Yeah.
They just have a paragraph listing all the notable directors he's worked with, and it's like all the directors. It's just so funny. So no, I did not recognize him either because this is the 90s, and I don't think I've seen him in anything that early. But I think that is a cool cameo that they got, definitely.
Yes. So a fun little thing. But let's move on to Tiga's sequel show, which is Ultraman Dyna. So following the massive success of Tiga, Tsuburaya and TBS immediately moved on to a direct sequel, which came out the next year, Ultraman Dyna. The first episode of Dyna following a week on from the end of Tiga. Dyna was set in the same continuity as Tiga, which was a very rare move in the franchise, had frequent cameos from the members of that cast. So basically everybody who was part of the Guts team of Tiga shows up, usually multiple times in Dyna. Dyna, of course, did have its own team, though, the Super Guts team, and a new Ultraman Dyna to serve as protagonist. But while, this is just my personal opinion, Dyna was a very interesting show and an entertaining show built on the model of Tiga, it was never able to truly distinguish itself from its already legendary predecessor, Tiga. And in this regard, one thing I think is interesting, Dyna suffers from a very similar problem to me as Sea Destiny, if we're making the Gundam comparisons, of that the old cast that they keep bringing back just ends up overshadowing the new cast time and time again. And bizarrely enough, the two shows, Sea Destiny and Ultraman Dyna, share the same name for the lead character, Shin Asuka, who just is constantly getting fucking overshadowed by more famous protagonists from the previous show. So if you don't want your new character to be overshadowed by a character from another show, don't name him Shin Asuka, because it just seems the fate of any character named such is they have some, Jesus-like predecessor, whether it's Kira or it's Daigo, that you just can't step out from under the shadow of. Dyna was a direct continuation of Tiga, not just from that narrative perspective, though, but also from a production one. And so Jissoji joined this production in much the same way. In all of his one episode, they were going to make more, but they ultimately only did one Jissoji episode, and that one was handled through his Kodai group as well. It's very much a direct continuation of his work on Tiga.
Okay, the Shin Asuka thing is blowing my fucking mind. I had no idea about that, and that's hilarious. Because is Shin Asuka in the episode we watched? I don't know, because we're getting into such experimental territory, it's hard to say.
He opens a door and falls down a hole, and then he's strapped to a bed. I think that's all he does. He's got like 3 lines of dialogue in the episode.
Yes. Which is fine. It's not a problem with the episode. But anyway, that's interesting. Maybe because this would have come before Seed Destiny, so maybe when they were writing Gundam Seed Destiny, they're like, you know what? We're going to have this protagonist be totally overshadowed. Let's take inspiration from Ultraman Dyna and call him Shin Asuka as an homage.
I mean,
Anyway.
it's honestly, if you see both the shows, it's really weird because his characterization is super similar. He's like this hot-blooded young kid who's constantly flying off the handle that everyone else has to pull back in, whereas Daigo was much more calm and reasonable and has this very kind of angelic Jesus-like quality to him. Like, I don't know what's going on there. It is very weird. But as someone who is a big Ultraman fan and a big Gundam fan, something's happening, and I don't know what.
So I would say the episode for Ultraman Dyna, which is kaiju play or monster drama, you could translate it either way. This is the move where we are fully into experimental territory. Like, you have, I think, left the diegesis of Ultraman behind. Like, nominally, this one is still roughly in the diegesis. The next one we'll talk about, Butterfly Dream, completely not. But, like, it's like its attachment to whatever the overall, world of Ultraman Dyna is so tenuous that you are in a world where it is unclear kind of what level of reality we're on, because it is all filtered through the level of this monster play with the monster Bundar. And I think it is really cool. It is an absolute exercise in style. You could very much put this and the next episode we'll talk about in conversation with, various Japanese new wave films like Eros Plus Massacre or any number of Oshima's films or Suzuki's films that kind of do this multimedia mixing. And it is a really kind of mind-breaking episode in certain ways because of that. But I found very entertaining. And one of those things where I'm like, I can't believe they made this for this, ostensibly children's tokusatsu show. It's wild.
Yeah, can you imagine being like an 8-year-old kid and fucking turning on your TV for the new episode of Ultraman Dyna and you watch this? Like, it's crazy. And it's phenomenal. And this is one where, I still ended up doing it, but I for my notes, just for my own sake, because I like doing this to help me kind of wrap my head around episodes, I write summaries. And for this one, I was like, man, you can't really write a meaningful summary of this episode. It's the same with the next one we'll talk about, where it's just like, the plot is not digestible. Like, the act of trying to explain the plot in words limits your understanding of what's happening instead of helping understanding what's happening, because it is not a thing that can be expressed in words, because it is this insane melding of, there's no fourth wall here. It's same with the next episode. Like, it is like the blending of reality and dreams and theater and film. Ultraman as a franchise, the notion of kaiju and what those mean, all of that is melded into a pot where, like, the notion of a suspension of disbelief, that you are looking at a thing that is a concrete narrative that exists in its own universe, that has its own rules that you are following, that is exploded. That is gone. And this episode, like, alerts you to the fact that that's gone very early on where one, you see like an experimental theater production with like a bunch of mirrors on the set that people are moving around and shit like that. And then later you get Super Guts driving to the mansion of this playwright who has written this play, the monster drama, that seems to be being reenacted in the real world, quote unquote real world. And they show the characters driving to the mansion as a manga panel with a cutout of the car in like 3 or 4 frames just being moved further and made smaller. And then a cut to a very cool manga panel of the mansion. It's with like the sound effects go, 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 go across the top. Like it's a horror manga. And you're immediately like, okay, the rules are gone. You took the rule book, you set it on fire, and you threw it away. Like, you can't watch this like a regular episode of Ultraman because it does not exist in a kind of definable reality. And the point is that the reality of the story is not definable.
Yeah, because it is basically about this play being written that is affecting reality, and it is, as you say, just putting it into words is kind of besides the point. This is one where I would say this is a 22-minute avant-garde short film that happens to involve some Ultraman iconography, and God bless it. I love it for that. I think it is an outstanding 22-minute short avant-garde film that happens to involve some Ultraman iconography, but like again, I love imagining the 8-year-old kid coming home from school going, I can't wait to see Shin Asuka, beat up the monster this week. And then it's this. And it is insane. But, maybe it instilled a life of experimental art, a lifelong love of experimental art in that child. I don't know. But it is a very notable episode. This is one where you just scroll through the screenshot gallery you made for us, Sean, and every frame of painting, oh, abso-fucking-lutely. Look at this thing. Every frame of this episode is fucking bonkers. This used more Vaseline than a fucking nursing home in a year. It's insane.
It's crazy. And all the mirror shit at the end with the fight and like the weird distorted mirrors that and the design of the monster Bundar that is like this Tower of Babylon that then sprouts like arms and legs, but they're playing with like the symmetry of the design of the monster and the reflections of the mirror, and like the solution to the problem is like they have the script of the play, and the front of the script has this like big like elaborate painting that is kind of incomprehensible, but when you open the script there's nothing in there other than blank pages and a single reflective piece of foil that you have to put in the middle of the painting and turn the foil into a cylinder that then reflects the painting, and using the symmetry of the painting creates a comprehensible image. And it's like, which is a sort of, to use a very Jonathan word, a synecdoche for the whole story itself, of this like reflections wrapping in on themselves to try to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. It's fucking awesome. One thing that's great about this, we're talking about imagining being a child watching this, but also imagine being a regular Japanese TV actor who is asked to act in this episode. Yes. I found a great interview from 2022 with Tsurano Takashi, who plays Shin Asuka, Ultraman Dyna, in the show. And just to be clear, like, I think the actor does a great job. I had criticisms of the show, and I still think this is a very good show. But he's great in the show. Doesn't get anything to do in this episode, but in other episodes he's awesome, trust me. But he, in this interview, talking about, it was a big interview talking like a lot about Ultraman stuff, and the interviewer asked him a question about this episode, and this is how he described working with Jissōji Akio. He said, I saw the raccoon puppet called Chinobo that Jissoji used for cameos in his projects. He told me, you shouldn't call it a puppet, it's an actor, okay? It was really strange. For that episode, director Jissoji brought along his Kodai group, so the crew suddenly changed. The whole filming process was different. He was like constantly shooting shadows, and when you looked at the monitor, you could only see the silhouette. They put Vaseline on the camera lens to make it blur, and I thought, what the heck is going on? He had no interest in the acting. He said, just keep talking, and I thought, what's up with this? It was really bizarre, all of it. When we watched the finished version, we thought, so this is what it was. It was the world inside director Jissoji's head. We just had to find a way to enter that world. It wasn't really acting. It was like making a picture. He was really particular about creating that picture. I had no idea what it was until it was finished. It was a befuddling set.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And especially also, this is, a young actor, probably in his first giant role.
Yeah.
Like leading this show. And Ultraman probably has a lot of weird things you got to do anyway, because it's a big tokusatsu show. But then one day you show up for a Jissoji episode. Oh boy, I love imagining that. I love all the Shinobu is an actor. Don't call it a puppet. That's fantastic. Because Shinobu, I think, features in this one more than any of the others, right? That we saw.
Yes, because you have all the weird shit in the playwright's like atelier, basically, where you've got like this weird mannequin of a woman, and Chinobu's there, and he's wearing the Super Guts uniform. Because also on the playwright's computer, they have like a floppy disk that has profiles of all the members of Super Guts, because they're all characters in the play. It's all fucking crazy. But one thing I think that interview
Okay, pause for a second.
Yes.
Sorry, Sean. This means, I hadn't thought about this yet, but Shinobu, as you say, is wearing a uniform. That means Jissoji had to go to the costume department for Ultraman Dyna and go, you've got to make a little costume for my bear. And we've got to make sure it fits, and we've got to have it ready for shooting. I want an interview with that person. That's great.
Yeah, that they're probably.
But sorry, go ahead.
They're probably stretched thin, because you know that all the production people are working crazy hard on an Ultraman show. Like, this motherfucker got to make this little fucking jacket for this stupid fucking stuffed animal. But anyways, but the thing with that interview that I think is just very interesting is that sense of that I don't think Jissoji looks at actors as like, I'm trying to get into the psychology of this character and I need this very specific performance. again, it's this like, you are part of the geometric construction of this image we are painting together. And so you got to go to your mark, and you got to like stand here and look there, and then say the stuff you're supposed to say. It's basically like the direction that he was given. It's like, just keep talking, just say the stuff. And in that regard, Chinobo is an actor, right? Like the Chinobo, he sits where he's supposed to sit, and he's turned where he's supposed to turn, and he's making the image what it needs to be. And I do think that when you, like, I think it's true of his earlier stuff as well, but I think when you get here, there's just a sense of, even when you're getting big performances, because you do get big performances in this and the next one for the villains of the episodes, the playwright here is a great big performance, but it feels like a performance, and I know that that's what it is, where Jissoji basically said, just do it. Like, here's what you're supposed to do. Here's your lines. Here's where I want you to be. Now you say the lines how you want to say them. And I never saw, and I looked through other interviews and stuff, any actor give a comment on direction that was anything beyond go here, look here, say your thing. And that's it. And I think that that's just like a cool quality of his filmmaking, where you see where like the priorities are very different. And it's why his episodes of Tiga and Dyna really stand out, is because those shows are much more interested in the interiorities of the characters of the main cast than classic Ultraman are. And so his episodes are so cool in many ways because they just kind of break out of that framework completely and just go buck fucking wild with, I do not care. I'm not interested in that. That's not what this is about. It's about something totally different.
Yeah, it reminds me of an anecdote of Ozu Yasujiro, the famous Japanese director. His, main lead actor in all his movies, Ryu Chishu, had an anecdote about one time on set, just a long back and forth between him and Ozu of getting the angle of the sake cup right in relation to the lens as he was drinking, because what Ozu cared most about was the geometric, like, composition of the scene, and both Ryu and the cup were there. And he's talking about, like, realizing he's also part of the mise-en-scène at that point. Yeah. And obviously Ryu loved working with Ozu and did it until Ozu's death. But I think about that kind of thing, that there's some, visual stylists who that is absolutely, the actors become part of the mise-en-scène, and you absolutely have that here, such that Shinobu can also be an actor.
Exactly. He's not a puppet, he's an actor too. And that's why he needs a cool little jacket with his name on it, like all the other actors do on the show.
Absolutely. One more Ultraman to talk about here, Sean.
Yes. So our last Ultraman for today, where we are making another big jump in time, going from 1998 all the way up to 2005. There were lots of other Ultraman shows in the interim there, but none of them featured Jissoji. So the revival of Ultraman, spearheaded by Tiga, continued to pace through the late 90s and early 2000s. In 2003 and 4, Tsuburaya attempted a sort of gritty reboot of Ultraman with a movie called Ultraman the Next and its sister show Ultraman Nexus, which moved the series into a much more heavily serialized drama format, into a much like darker kind of overall tone and style. The show, while I think very well made, and I think it's a very good show, Nexus, and The Next is also a perfectly good Ultraman movie, the show proved unpopular with the general audience, and so Tsuburaya chose to course correct. In classic Ultraman fashion, this is like the whole history of Ultraman is, they made an ambitious dark show. It ended up not responding well for a certain segment of the audience, so they went to a back-to-basics series aimed at a younger audience. It's like Call of Duty, we want to make a weird one, nobody liked it, hey, boots on the ground. It's like, hey, it's yes. M16s again and AK-47s. It's the same kind of thing. Ultraman is paved with this kind of history. So they went to this more back-to-basics show that became what is Ultraman Max, which is what we'll be talking about for these last two episodes. The twist for Ultraman Max, and what makes it very different than the previous Ultraman shows, is that they infused Ultraman Max with a sense of nostalgia that all the modern Ultramans, since Tiga brought the show back, regularly avoided. They did not do, here's a bunch of old monsters. They didn't do, we're bringing back old actors. None of that kind of stuff. Like, every once in a while, they would have, like, if it was, like, one of the most famous monsters, like the Baltan, which is one of the aliens, maybe. But anything else, they were not trafficking in nostalgia. They were making a very new kind of Ultraman. For all those series, Tiga and on, Max was like, hey, there's this whole big legacy of this show. It's very much like new Doctor Who in that regard, of like, there's all this stuff we can pull from. So they brought back a bunch of classic actors, some as guest stars, but several as regular members of the cast, including OG Ultraman Kurobe Susumu returns, now playing the main team's overseer, so like the guy who's overall in charge, like above the captain of the team. And they also chose to bring back many of the classic Ultraman monsters from the original series and Ultraseven. As part of this nostalgia ploy of bringing all these like old stuff back, they also brought back many of the people behind the camera of those classic shows. And part of that is they also brought Jissōji back to Ultraman for one last hurrah with 2 episodes of Ultraman Max. His final episode for Max, which is The Unmarked Town, which is a pseudo-sequel to his classic Ultraseven episode, The Marked Town. That proved to be one of his final projects released while he was alive, as Jissoji passed away from stomach cancer at the age of 69 on November 29th, 2006, almost exactly 1 year after the airing of the episode. So he did make a couple of things after he made that second episode of Ultraman Max, but none of them aired while he was still alive.
And as we will talk about when we get to that episode, that is wild, because The Unmarked Town is about as perfect a career summation thing as I've ever seen from anybody. But we also have the episode Butterfly Dream to talk about, episode 22 of Ultraman Max, which is very much, I think, a refashioning of a lot of ideas in the monster drama episode, but making it a step more literal in that it is about somebody writing an Ultraman episode. And you have multiple sort of layers of, the story within the story to do that. At the end, you have our Ultraman for this series, Kaito, literally typing on the computer to finish the story of the episode. It's very, very meta. I think if I'm like comparing the episodes, I do think I like the Kaiju drama one more, because I think the general abstraction of it, I think, is more thematically and kind of aesthetically rich than this one. I think this one is really fun and really good. I don't know if it adds up to enough for me compared to that one, but it is very cool to see Jissoji just completely letting his freak flag fly here.
Yeah, because this one, it definitely it coheres a bit more. I think it resolves into a more clear distinction of the writer is in the quote-unquote real world writing Ultraman Max, and then Kaito is in the world of Ultraman Max, and then through the dreams, they end up switching places and stuff. And, then you have the kind of, old classic kind of almost a slightly cliche twist of the woman who is in the dream, who is the kind of mastermind of everything, is in the real world, or is she, or did we wake up? It is of course riffing on with the title, and that it is in the episode as well. The kind of classic, the Zhuangzi, the Chinese poem about the butterfly dream, like, am I a man dreaming of a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming of a man? That concept. And so just with that kind of like the permeability of reality, the way your perception shapes reality is definitely like all over this episode, including just lots of like fun, weird little touches, like this very theatrical element of having the butterflies that are on the little sticks, that they're this little toy butterflies that are fluttering around. You do have some, like, I think, really cool special effects stuff going on in this episode. One of my favorite sequences, because I just think it's so well done, is you have that one point pretty deep in the episode where Kaito is now, like, he is losing his grip on reality, and he is having the dreams of him being the writer, and then he's in the HQ talking to the love interest character that I'm now blanking on, because I'm trying to keep a lot of Mizuki. The kind of trying to keep a lot of Ultraman characters in my head. He's talking to Mizuki, and then she's telling him about the butterfly dream, but then her face starts morphing into the crazy evil lady face, and it kind of, like, the effect of that is so well done. In my screenshot gallery, I went and did a just, like, frame by frame of it, because it's so effective. The way, like, you don't even realize at first that it's happening until it gets a little bit more dramatic, but they blend the two actors' faces together in this way, the way that is, like, legitimately kind of fucking horrifying. You've got, some great Jissoji kind of, like, classic shots of Kaito in the very old school, old-fashioned Japanese apartment that is kind of out of date for 2005, and the tatami doors open up, and then you have the base, the HQ for the Dash team there, and all the members are there, and then they start turning into the old lady. Like, there's some good weird shit in this episode.
I took note of that effect too, because it's like genuinely extraordinary because, as you say, you don't quite notice it while it's happening, and then you're freaked out when you realize it is. And, you know, compared to a lot of digital effects at the time, that's quite impressive. But yeah, it's, you know, I loved this episode. I really enjoyed watching it. I think of the two kind of like super meta episodes, I probably prefer the kaiju drama one because I think it not coming together as cleanly also makes it a little more interesting. This one, it comes together more cleanly, but in a way where I'm not 100% sure if I have a good grasp on the purpose of it as strongly, but it is still incredibly entertaining and just very bold and daring, and another one where you just have fun imagining the, you know, kids watching Ultraman Max being presented with this and this absolute madness.
Yes. But then you get his final episode 24 of Ultraman Max, The Unmarked Town, once again featuring the alien Metron, although they always give the different monsters epithets in Ultraman, so it's like the ancient monster, or like the space monster, you know, the sound monster. And in this, they call the alien Metron the dialogue monster, is how I would translate it, or like the conversation monster. It's the same term used as in the 00 Gundam movie, The Awakening of a Trailblazer, when they're talking about like communicating with the aliens. It's like that word. And which the Taiwan monster, I think, is the word they use, and it's fucking, I love it. But yes, this is coming full circle, or going back to maybe his most famous episode after the John Mueller episode, The Marked Town, as a sort of weird pseudo sequel. Even though Ultraman Max is not technically supposed to be in the same continuity as those shows, that is a thing that the next show, Ultraman Mebius, will do and try to create a unified continuity. But it doesn't fucking matter. And we go back to the same town. People start going crazy. It's the same old school Ultraseven effect of the red light on their face with the piercing noise, which is just a great way to sell someone losing their minds. And so Kaito and the team have to investigate it. And over the course of the investigations, they realize that it is not, of course, cigarettes this time. There's a running joke of the detective who's constantly trying to smoke, but he's always in a place where there's a no smoking sign and he can't do it. And instead of it being cigarettes, it is the cell phones. And there is a signal being sent to the cell phones that is making people lose their minds. Kaito tracks it down to the alien Metron, and you find out it is the same alien Metron who survived the events of that episode. He was nursed back to health by some nice humans, including the detective when he was a little kid. And then Kaito goes and talks to the Metron, and the Metron just says, you know what? Yeah, fine. Like, you want me to leave? Sure, I'll go home. Like, I was just kind of fucking around because I realized I don't need to. The alien or the humans have done it themselves. We don't need to do anything to invade. We don't need to do anything to destroy the trust in humans. You guys just keep on making all these machines that are just making your brain small, fall into fucking sludge, and it's fine. So I'll go home and we'll just wait. Bye. And he leaves, and that's the episode. And it is fucking amazing, and it is also very haunting, I think.
It is very haunting. It is very funny. I think this episode is like full-on Twin Peaks The Return levels of poignant in terms of it being a final work about the passage of time, about the world kind of leaving you behind or befuddled, and about the specter of death, because quite literally, Metron here becomes a stand-in for Jissoji, very self-consciously. He is the person who has been here all this time, and now he is leaving, and he's very worried. He's like thinking that the people he's leaving behind seem to have kind of fucked themselves, but this is his last hurrah, and he will confuse everybody on his way out the door and then leave. And it is... Yeah, it's an episode that is, it's very light on its feet. It's a very funny episode as you're watching it. Like, the guy who is playing Metron, it's such a good performance. It is such a good comedy performance. The way, also, it cuts between him and his human form and his Metron form throughout that conversation, and it's all great. He's got a little silly straw in his drink. All of that is very funny. But as you say, it's very haunting thematically. I think, the choice to go from cigarettes to we're not smartphones yet, to just cell phones is so smart and is so incisive. Like, that is a comparison we make a lot today, especially because now we have years of studies that have revealed that, smartphones and social media have similarly addictive effects to, like, cigarettes and whatnot. And so I think there's a lot of good comparisons to draw. But in 2005, that was not a widely drawn comparison yet, because we're not even to smartphones yet. We're not to touchscreens. These are like old style, no Nokia flip phone kind of things. And already, you know, Jissōji is ahead of the game in kind of making that comparison. But then in going even further and saying, yeah, that whole plan I had in that classic episode from the 60s, I don't need to do that anymore. You people are just, you fucking yourselves. You're done. And again, Jissōji had no way of knowing while he was alive how prescient that would be, because this is another one that, to me, you cannot divorce modern conceptions of like generative AI stuff from, where it's like, yeah, we're not even writing our own shit anymore. We're not even making our own drawings. We're just, you know, letting our brains atrophy. And there have been studies on this about how much the brain, truly like a muscle, atrophies if you allow AI to do your work for you. It's very bad for you. We have science on this now. And yeah, if there was an alien like Metron, there's nothing they could do to us that we are not doing to ourselves. And that is such an incisive point. And you have all of that, and then you add on this, the overwhelming, I think, poignancy of this episode and the elegaic quality of it. And it's one of those where you finish it and you've had a very good time, but then you are just sitting there kind of staring at the wall for a couple of minutes because it makes you feel a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's just, I was just totally floored when the first time I watched it. And it was the thing that I watched this episode, I'm like, fuck it, oh my God, we have to do the podcast. Like, I was like, there's no way we're not doing this Jissoji podcast, because I was just like so overwhelmed by it. Because yeah, I'm just going to, because I screenshotted that conversation, because I just want to read out the dialogue there, because I just think it's so good. He says, humans have gained all these convenient tools and have started to degenerate. The town is filled with monkeys. Humans will perish by themselves. The new tools are starting to make their brains atrophy. We don't need to fight you. The humans are feeble-minded, destroy the environment, and have no manners. And you have no reason to protect them. And the only thing that Ultraman Max can say in response is just to be quiet and pull his gun. The fact that Ultraman Max and Kaito don't have a counter argument. They have nothing to say in response to this. Like, the humans are doing the alien invasion on their own. Like, I don't need to do it. Like, they're turning themselves into monkeys, and they're making their brains into sludge, and I can just, and the Metrons can leave, and we can just wait a little bit. And you have these great, like, these black and white shots that it cuts to multiple times of people on the train looking at their cell phones and all this stuff, overlaid with these sounds of animals yelping and growling that I also think is just like disturbing. Like, there's something upsetting about it, and like the way the sound mix is done. And just this sense of the decay it's showing in that passage of time. And there's all these elements in the episode that communicate it so effectively. Like, one little detail I love that I didn't know at the time, but I think makes sense. When Metron lures Kaito to this like remote location, they end up in this warehouse, this little like kind of warehouse room full of monster suits that are old Ultraman monster suits. And that is actually an old building on the Tsuburaya Productions lot that they used to house monster suits that they were going to demolish, and so they literally shot it there. So those are used there, and Seibozu is there, and Seibozu is the one that opens the door for Kaito and lets Kaito in, which I think is a great detail. There's a couple of other classic monsters in there as well. And this sense of that, like, this old building that was decades old, that's tied to the history of this franchise and this big production house that was going to be demolished, being where this conversation is held. And then you have the kind of replication of the fight between Ultraseven and Metron with a very similar kind of thing, where you have it at sunset and it's set in the same city. So you have that river running through, but you also have this cool little detail with the miniature set where on the half of the city that's on past the river where Metron is all Showa era buildings. And they're these small buildings and stuff like that. And on the half that the Ultraman is, that also has this more kind of purple lighting as opposed to the regular like orange sunset light behind Metron. On Ultraman Max's side, it's all modern buildings and like these big skyscrapers and stuff. And it just kind of showing and communicating that passage of time through the set dressing. And then just the ultimate sign off of, we're not going to have a fight, which is almost unprecedented. There are a couple of episodes in Ultraman that don't have an Ultraman fights the monster thing. Obviously you have like a couple in 7 where he turns into 7, he like blows up an alien ship, and there's not really a fight. There's one in Ultraman Nexus where, because that's very serialized, you don't really have, the main character has not become Ultraman to be able to have the fight yet, really. But you never had anything like this, where the monster just wins the argument and just leaves. And Ultraman is there. He's ready to go. He's like in his little fighting stance and all this stuff. And I love that Metron he like runs in place like the shot that they used in the original where they make it look like they're running. But they're using camera and stuff to make it look like they're running, but the actors in the suits were just running in place to do it. And he runs in place for a little bit. He then stops, turns around, waves. Max waves in response and then looks at his hand and like, what the fuck am I doing? And then Metron just leaves and there's no fight. And like, I think it's just amazing on its own as an episode, but particularly as someone who has watched like hundreds of episodes of Ultraman, there is something like in your gut, like super deep seated, that's like, fuck, oh my God. Like the monster just won without throwing a punch and just pieced out is a crazy, super bold, wild way to end it when you have seen hundreds of episodes of the show that basically always end with Ultraman either resolving things peacefully after having a bit of wrestling or like slicing the motherfucker in half and having his guts fall out or blowing him up. And this is another solution that we had never seen in an Ultraman episode before.
I think part of what is key to both this episode being funny, but also poignant, but also haunting, is that there's no bitterness in it. There's no judgment from Metron, really. It's like, well, hey, you guys are doing this to yourselves. That's fine. Do what you want. I'm going home. And it's damning to us because we care about us, but Metron is kind of like, not my battle. Have fun with your horrible humanity. And he just leaves. And there's something about that makes it all the more powerful, I think, in kind of every dimension, because it's not an old man yelling at clouds. It's an old man observing kind of, I think, objective reality and then going, but I can't live forever, so peace. And there's something about that I find so enormously moving at the end of this episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in the sense of like, have we built a world that an alien would want to invade? You know, like it's like, yeah. It's where in the 60s shows there is that very classic optimism of we've come together, we have made this international task force and brought the whole world together, and it's all about science and the pursuit of science, and we're going out and exploring space and all this kind of stuff. And there are episodes of Ultraman and Ultraseven and all those shows that are about like, and we can't destroy the environment because the pollution is bad and all these things. And it's just, you go and you keep watching these shows and it's like, yep, now it's even worse. Oh, and now it's even worse. And by the time you get to 2005, it's like, what has actually happened with that optimism? We're past when those shows were supposed to have happened and that future, more optimistic society was meant to have occurred. And have things gotten actually meaningfully better, or in what ways have they become like demonstrably worse? It's like, you know, yeah, we used to smoke all these fucking awful cigarettes and now everyone's sitting on their phone, no one's talking to each other. And it is and it's just the way that it's delivered cinematically through this episode just cuts straight to the heart, I think, and it makes it very moving.
Yeah, absolutely. This episode it's really incredible. The only thing I could really reach for as a comparison is Twin Peaks: The Return, which, if you know me and you know Sean,
yep,
is about the highest praise I can give it, as just a really unique final work from someone, or nearly final work in the case of Jissoji. But man, it's a humbling thing to watch. It's amazing. It's funny. It also has the most perfectly executed candy cigarette joke I've ever seen at the beginning, especially because it's in the context of this, you know the marked town, it's trading on your knowledge of that older episode. We're starting, it's the same scenario, we've got the cigarettes, we're queued up for this, and you got this young woman pulling out the cigarettes, and Kaito's like, what the fuck, you don't smoke? He doesn't say that, but there's this like, what the fuck look on his face, and then she just takes a bite and then smiles and laughs at him while offering it. It's a perfect comedy beat, and I love it.
Yeah, and it is, I think, the thing that makes the episode so good is that it is one of the Jissoji comedy episodes. It's one of the ones, because he has these, it's one of the funny ones. I mean, the Dream episode in Tiga is also a comedy episode. But this one just has this kind of haunting undercurrent. And it also does have like the actual final moment of the episode is also just an absolute killer, where Kaito's again left speechless. He's on the rooftop with Mizuki kind of wondering like, what do we do about this? Like, where do we go? And then Mizuki turns around and basically says, but, and she's going to give a response. And then the film cuts like the film has been cut, like it's been broken.
No, it runs out. It's like a leader of film. Like it's like you've run out of film in the reel. This is like the end of a leader of film. And it's like there's just nothing left in the camera, which is also just so poignant.
And then I think honestly, I think this makes it even better is that it then just harsh smash cuts to the like regular thing of next time on Ultraman Max, Max is going to face the good of the alien, you know, and like the going from that to just like immediately it's the because Max in particular has this tone that's so like, hey guys, it's Ultraman, and here's an Ultraman like Ultra 7. That's the last time we saw the alien Metron. And it just has this like real kids show in your face energy with the way it does the next episode previews. And like it is such a harsh turn. And I think it actually works for the episode so well of feeling that like the somber tone of the ending of that episode, and it just ending, and then you're just jerked right back into the reality of the modern world that he's kind of satirizing or parodizing or poking fun at, and the super high energy kids show presentation that's very tonally different than the classic Ultramans. It is just, you know, obviously Jissōji wouldn't have been like, and we need to have the next time episode preview to be like, that's just like a generic thing they always do. But it fits so perfectly for what this episode is saying.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Sean, I am so glad you suggested this topic. Yeah. It was so much fun. I learned a lot. I laughed a lot. I enjoyed every inch of these episodes. I want to go watch a bunch more Ultraman. I don't know when I will find the time, but I want to find it. Maybe we'll just need to abandon Japanimation Station and start Ultraman Station or something. But who knows? It's good stuff, and I was so glad to watch these.
Well, I can vouch for Ultraman's a really good show to just watch at a slow pace, you know, and just do a couple episodes a week here and there, and before you know it, you'll have watched like hundreds of episodes, and you know, you'll have started watching a show made in 1966, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this show came out when I was in high school. That's weird. When did this happen? I was watching things that were shot 4:3 on film, and then it was 4:3 on digital video, and now it's 1080p widescreen. Weird. It's fucking time has moved on. Eventually,
Sean,
watch a lot of these episodes.
You just had a brutal moment for me where you said, in high school, I said, but you've only gotten up to 2008. That doesn't... And then I realized... And I need to go crawl in a fucking sewer and die. Oh God.
Yeah, so maybe you can find one of these weird Japanese concrete pipe yards to just go live in as a hobo, and just hang.
No, you know what? I think I'm gonna go off like the monster from the Monster Graveyard and just kick rocks sadly with my hands in my pockets glumly. And if I see a rocket, you know, shaped like Ultraman, I'll grab onto it.
Yeah, I think we're all in our older age, Jonathan. We're all on our way off to the Monster Graveyard, and we'll see you all there. Schwatch!
Daikara 夫婦として